All right, moving on. Our board did meet in closed session this evening, and we'll have the closed session announcements from Trustee Aguila.
Good evening. The board discussed today in closed session pursuant to Government Code 54954.5B and 54956.8, conference with real property negotiators, Property Hill Education Center, Recreational Area, Agency Negotiator, Jancy Hawkins, Assistant Superintendent, Business and Operations, Negotiating Parties, City of Novato, under negotiations, price, and items, and terms. And the second item discussed in closed session pursuant to Government Code 48918C, student expulsion, case 60659, request for readmission. So I will go ahead and read. It says today, Tuesday, August 20th, 2019, the Nevada Unified School District Board of Trustees met in closed session to verify compliance by student 60659 with the rehabilitation plan for the student to be readmitted to NUSD. And the motion was made by Trustee Nell and second by Trustee Aguila. The board voted to readmit student 60659 to the Nevada Unified School District as of August 20th, 2019. The students successfully completed the rehabilitation plan to be readmitted to NUSD. So with that, I will go ahead and take a roll call right in here. And Trustee Aguila, that's 8 yeas. Trustee Butler?
Aye.
Aye. Trustee Cooper?
Aye.
Diane Gasson? Trustee Nell?
Aye.
Gregory Mack?
Aye.
Trustee Millerick?
Aye.
Okay, so that's 7-0, and that takes care of this part of the agenda. Yes, so for 3D, 3B, we gave direction.
Just for the minutes. Okay. All right, moving on, approval of our agenda this evening. It stands as is. There's no changes. Okay, so a first by Trustee Cooper. Second by Trustee Mack to approve our agenda this evening. All those in favor? 7-0. Okay. And if any of the public would like to make a comment before the board, either an agenda on an item on the agenda or an item not on the agenda, please fill out a blue card. I already have a few of them here. They're right over there on that cart, and bring your blue card up to Ellen and we'll plug you in where you get to speak. You have 3 minutes to speak before the board, and you just come right up to the podium when I call your name, and our timer is right there and it'll count down as you're talking, and just please stay within the 3 minutes is what we ask. And if it's a non-agenda public comment, the board does not respond. We were unable to respond to anything regarding that item, but we'll take it in consideration, and we can also even tell staff to meet with you or something like that. So that will be determined as we hear the comments. All right, so moving on to our consent. Just plug that in there. Consent agenda. We do have a couple changes at our table. One is the August 6th minutes, which would be item 14A, so that's an amendment to those. And then item 14K, you have the actual agreement for the crossing guards is the yellow piece of paper. That was unfortunately not included in our packets, but it's here, right here, and there is nothing unusual about it. It's the same agreement like we've had for previous years. I just wanted to make sure the board had a copy of that. And is anybody pulling anything? Nope. All right. So with those two amendments,
I'll move approval of the consent agenda as amended.
okay. Thank you. So I have a Trustee Nell as a first, approving the consent. Trustee Gasson is the second. All those in favor to approve the consent, including the two amendments? 7-0. All right, thank you. Okay, announcements from the board, and in our future board meetings, we will have our student board members will be attending. We just haven't figured out exactly what meeting that will be yet, so Trustee Miller, do you have any announcements?
I was able to attend the opening day where our teachers came back and spent their first day together organizing to get ready for a class, which I think starts Thursday. I'm sure the superintendent will give us an update. Thank you for the program. It was interesting and a change from years prior, so that was great. Thanks.
Trustee Nell?
I too attended the opening presentations of our kickoff day down at the Civic Center, and would like to thank all of our teachers and our classified and administrators for helping to get the school year ready to go. I appreciate it very much. It looks like we're as ready as we're going to be.
Trustee Gasson?
Last week, I was at Novato High School, actually as an individual. I was at the senior orientation and was with a group of parents, ladies, that were registering kids to vote. And I just wanted to let you all know we registered or pre-registered 51 students. And I was not aware until recently that they can actually pre-register at 16 and 17 now. So it was great. Kids were really enthused, and they can be of any party or undeclared. So it was great.
Trustee Mack? Trustee Cooper?
I too attended the back to school event. It was great. Hats off to Superintendent Koska. I think it was really well received. Staff all happy to be there. I also attended a presentation at the City Hall this past week for about an item that's on our agenda tonight about the public safety power shutoff.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a really, really important issue, and I'm glad we're covering it. Thanks.
Trustee Aguila?
Yes, I too attended the opening day back to school, and yesterday, and I thank you for opening up and sharing, and I enjoyed the speakers, and it's a great event, so thank you.
All right, and I did as well attend the opening day. Nicely done. Great job. It's important that we do have that event every year. Brings everybody together. It kicks off the school year. It kind of gets us all on the same page, and so it's an important day to have. I was able to drop in for new teacher orientation, which was held here last Friday, and there was about 30 new teachers, and that was a great event. Jonathan did a great job. There he is. Great job, Jonathan. Good job pulling that all together, and your staff as well, I know, had a big part of that. And I also as well was at Novato High, kind of not as a trustee, but one of the parents asked me to help sell Novato High apparel for the freshman orientation. So that was fun. I was able to hang out and see something. I realized I don't know anybody anymore, which is not good. My daughter just graduated this last year. So, all right, moving on to Superintendent Koska.
All right, thank you. I too attended the kickoff for the school year. Yeah, it was good. I just want to say it was a great event. I played a small part in it. I want to thank the team, the student services team. I keep messing up their name. Education services team upstairs. We had a lot of teachers in their classrooms getting ready for the school year this weekend. We also had our ed services team down in San Rafael getting that room ready for that very special event. So appreciate their generosity of time that helped make the day great. And then just the level of engagement on part of the teachers and staff that attended the event was fantastic from the moment that it started until the moment that it ended. And then a number of folks even stayed and helped us to clean up. So just so appreciative of everybody. I think we've got the stage set for a really positive start to the year.
There we go. All right, non-agenda public comment. I do have some cards here. I'm going to read off the first three speakers, and if you could just go in that order and come up to the podium. You have 3 minutes. So I have Julie Walters, Alicia. Oh, thank you. All right, you'll say it when you come up. Okay, and Emily King are the first three speakers.
Hi. My name is Julie Walters, and I have a second grader and a fifth grader at San Ramon Elementary School. I'm here because I am my daughter's voice, and I care deeply about our schools. Since our daughter was in preschool, we've had problems with NUSD that I have never imagined possible in a school. I viewed educators as almost altruistic, and at the least, putting the needs of the students above politics. What I have found in the past 7 years has been quite the opposite. Having felt alone, disheartened, frustrated, angry, and frankly depressed about the situation that our family found ourselves in and are still in today, I began reaching out to other special education parents in our district, other districts across California, and educators with whom I have professional relationships. I started interviewing other special education parents in our district and asking them at first, tell me about your experience, and then if I could share anonymously from our talks. These quotes are a fair and representative sample of things that I've heard. To be fair, the most positive parent that I spoke with is a professional, loves our school, the school thinks highly of her, she volunteers on almost every committee you could think of, and she still had to admit to me, I never even knew to ask that my son be included in field trips. I didn't even know it was an option. Another parent, I volunteered in the classroom just to ensure the teacher would like me and treat my child fairly this year. Another, I am afraid to speak up at the IEP meetings about violations because they won't get fixed anyway, and then they will treat my child and I differently. Another, Miss X asked me privately, Miss X is the teacher, asked me privately if I've ever considered homeschooling my child. Another, they say one thing at the IEP and they never follow up. They do not tell the truth at these meetings. Another parent, the teacher actually told me that she agreed with me off record, but had a job to protect and could not say certain things at the IEP meeting. Another, X's teacher and I are no longer on speaking terms. It's incredibly awkward. Another, I was told that I sent too many emails and I asked too many questions. Another, the district is sending our child to an out-of-district school because they can't serve him here. We were raised in Novato and are heartbroken. Another, when asking the paraeducator a school-related question, I was told not to answer, the paraeducator said, I was told not to answer your questions or speak with you about your child. Another said, quote, by a high-ranking staff member, children like these, well, some of them end up doing reports on the gold rush in 4th grade, and some of them, like yours, end up coloring pictures of gold. Thanks.
Okay. Hello, my name's Alicia Incho Ogie. I know this is going to be tough for you. My daughter Elena is 7 years old and on the autism spectrum. I'm here tonight to speak to you about my experience as a parent of a special needs child in this district. First, can you speak into the mic? Oh, sure. I'm sorry. First off, I want to let you know that I'm very happy with my daughter's placement and the classroom she's currently in, just as I was happy with her placement the 3 previous years as well. However, Elena has always been in a county program. There's just never been a district class that's fit her needs, so I've been told. Her first 3 years of schooling were in an MCOE program that just happened to be at our home school. Some of you may remember me from a few years back when a group of parents came to oppose then Special Ed Director Liz Smith's plan to take the children in the county program at Lou Sutton back to the district. I opposed it for many reasons, mainly because the teachers in that program that my daughter was in were amazing and she was thriving. Also, there was no clear plan as to where the classroom would be, who would teach it, curriculum. In summary, there was just no clear, well-thought-out transition plan, and that was just not a chance my husband and I were willing to take with our daughter, who already faces so many challenges. So Elena went through her 3 years of that program at Lou Sutton, loved it, it was great. We were really sad to leave, especially because it was around the corner from our home. And Elena's new school is at Edna McGuire, which is now 18 miles away. Again, the teacher there is amazing, the campus is beautiful, the program is perfect. I love nearly every aspect of it except for the drive. It's awful. And it's taken such a toll on me that by the end of the school year, I didn't know if I'd be able to continue it. But there's no real alternative. I just couldn't see sending my minimally verbal child with autism and anxiety on an hour-and-a-half bus ride to school and an hour-and-a-half back. That's how long they told me that it would take to get her there. That's a total of 3 hours a day spent on a bus with mixed-age children, no aid to supervise. That just didn't seem like an option. So the decision to drive her myself was made, and I want to give you some perspective on this. So I'm driving my then 6-year-old daughter, along with my 2-year-old daughter, to Mill Valley 5 days a week in commuter traffic while very pregnant, at least the first half of the year. The second half of the year, I then had a newborn to cart around with us. That's 18 miles to Mill Valley to drop her off at 8:30 a.m., 18 miles back home to Novato to be in my community, run errands, be with my other children, 18 miles back to pick her up, 18 miles back home. In case anybody was wondering, that's 72 miles a day. 360 miles a week, roughly 1,400 miles a month. So multiply that by, say, 9 months, and I drove somewhere around 13,000 miles simply taking my child to school so that she could have access to an appropriate education in a classroom that fits her needs. Now, and I was never offered any reimbursement for that, and actually when I asked for it, I was told it was not possible, which I've since found out is not true. Now, as grateful as I am for that amazing counting class, I can't help but feel disappointed and frustrated that there isn't a class that my daughter can attend at our home school or even in our district. I can't help but feel saddened by the fact that my children will likely never go to school together, and my younger children will likely never go to school with anyone like their sister.
Hi, my name is Emily King. I have a very similar story to Alicia's. I have 3 children. My oldest is starting her 5th year of school with NUSD, and my middle is going to be starting her 1st year. They're 22 months apart, and when they start school on Thursday, one is going to go to school at our neighborhood school in Novato, and one will go to school in San Rafael. I could spend hours talking you through the last 5 years and all of the disagreements we've had with our educational team, with administrators who aren't here anymore, and why we've ended up allowing Megan to go to school in San Rafael. Ultimately, it was our only option. If one thing comes from what I say here tonight, I'd like it to be that everyone in this community thinks about the spirit of the equity imperative, the vision statement, and the goals of NUSD as they relate to students with disabilities' place or lack thereof in the NUSD community. I would strongly urge all of you to consider whether the equity imperative and the values of inclusion, equity, and innovation are even being considered with respect to students with disabilities, especially those with severe and complex disabilities. The most recent LCAP report indicated that there are inequitable outcomes for students with disabilities. As the equity imperative asks us to do, let's examine the structures and policies contributing to those outcomes and do better. It hurts all of our children when our children with disabilities are segregated. The equity imperative emphasizes the importance of community, and NUSD states inclusion as a key value. When we segregate our students with disabilities in other cities and exclude them from our community, we're doing a disservice to every single student here. I'd encourage you to consider the negative impacts both on individual families like ours and on the community as a whole when these students are systematically bused or driven out of their communities to fully segregated classrooms. As the equity imperative says, it is in the best interest of the community that every one of our students succeeds. Let's live up to that, because the message we're teaching our children when we don't apply this to our students with disabilities is profound. Thanks.
Thank you. The last 2 speakers, I have Chelsea McCormick and Diane Paul.
Hello. My name is Chelsea McCormick, and I have 2 students being served by Novato Unified. My oldest child has exceptional needs and has been served by the district for the last 12 years, and it has been a daunting experience, to say the least. Due to the challenges we faced early on in my child's educational career, I had to educate myself about the laws and rights that we had under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, along with state regulations, in order to effectively advocate for my child. Once your student ages out of early intervention, it is a very isolating experience, and there is a lack of community and support, which is why I started the group Novato Parents of Exceptional Students. It provides us with a venue to connect, ask questions, share information, and most importantly, to serve as a source of support for families navigating this journey. For the last decade, special education has barely been an afterthought in this district. In the first edition of the Equity Imperative in 2017, students with disabilities were not included. Instead, it only focused on race. It was after a few of us parents reached out about this issue that the district eventually revised it to include students with special needs, socioeconomically disadvantaged students, and foster youth in 2018. For far too long, our students have been overlooked and disregarded in our district, and it's time for that to change. It is not equitable that we have programs within our district that exclude students with disabilities from having the same level of access as their non-disabled peers. For example, students in middle school and high school who require resource are excluded from the opportunity to participate in an elective. It's not equitable that high school students attending MSA who require a resource period only have access to one period of their discipline, as opposed to two, like all the other students. We have students with IEPs who are more than intellectually capable of going on and being successful in college, but their needs aren't being met early on, and later they're not meeting the A to G requirements. We have students being promoted from grade to grade while being grade levels behind in reading and math, always in a position trying to play catch up while barely keeping their head above water. We ask that you make special education a priority in this district. We have been met with so many hollow words over the years. It is time for us to see action. We have brought this up at various times over the last few years with various administrators, and we are asking again that the district begin to take action by creating a neutral special education liaison position at the district. This position would serve to support our families who are struggling navigating the IEP process. It is important to note it's not just the students who are suffering, but the parents and family as well. And the IEP process can take a tremendous toll on the emotional well-being of the family. I know of many families who ultimately had to pull their student from the district because they can no longer deal with the stress of back and forth. We ask that the district demonstrate that it does in fact care about equity and show us that equity includes students with disabilities by starting with creating this special education liaison position. It is time for the culture in our district to change. We can do better. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Diane Paul. I've spoken here a few times. Specifically, I'm going to address elementary special day classrooms. Those are called STCs. Today I got an email from the Nevada Police Department where Chris Costa, our new superintendent, was quoted saying, all students have the fundamental right to feel welcome, safe, and included at our schools. However, many students with IEPs and SDCs do not feel welcome, safe, and included at elementary school sites. It often feels as if Nevada Unified School District does not see us. Welcome. There was no welcome when our family started at NUSD. No newcomer to help us with our transition into the world of IEPs. SDC students are not celebrated on their first and last days of kindergarten or on their first and last days of early education like general education students are. At all-in-one days, we are not given a list of who will be providing services like speech, OT, or psych. There are no meetings to provide us with resources and support. We are segregated and highlighted as separate in yearbooks. Parents are almost universally not allowed to volunteer in the classrooms or to classroom parties in SDC classrooms. That means we're not getting art, because that is a parent volunteer program. No art for the special needs kids. It's absurd. There are signs promoting no excuses college attendance hanging in hallways where students who will not get high school diplomas pass every day. At the first IEP meeting of the year last September, my program manager told me that she had not had time to open Henry's case yet. That made me feel super welcome at my own IEP meeting. Safe. There is no anti-bullying program or sex education program in the SDCs. There is no explanation to general education students about the SDC students who are being mainstreamed in PE, music, and during recess. In the absence of an explanation, young students are left to come to their own conclusions about the otherness of the SDC students in the most negative way possible. The special needs culture is not respected like other cultures at NUSD, included. We were not included in the One World Technology Plan, Saturday Academies, the Facilities Master Plan. I'm still waiting for the email from you. It's been about 3 years. Yep. Extracurricular activities, late bells, it goes on and on. You do not see us when you are creating programs for NUSD. Our standardized test scores are not sent to us. We have to complain for over 2 years that we are not all getting emails from the special education department before IT finally resolved that problem. One reason I rejected a Hamilton placement was that the SDC students had to stay in their classrooms during lunchtime. Really? Let's just segregate them. Let's keep them away from everybody. That's what you guys are doing. You do not celebrate us.
I have a final speaker, Bridget Nevin.
Good evening. I'm Bridget Nevin, and I have 4 children, all with learning disabilities. The youngest, I have moved to Hamilton, and he'll be in the 2nd grade. I have 2 daughters in 5th and 7th grade at Novato Charter School, as well as a son who's in high school who I've chosen to remove from the district. He'll be attending a charter school in Sonoma County because I've given up on NUSD providing appropriate services for him. In the 8 years that I've been dealing with special ed services or 504 plans, I've spent upwards to $300,000 supplementing my children's education. And part of why I decided to speak was to support these ladies, and we have a real equity issue. Not everybody can supplement public education. I, for the last 8 years, have pulled out each of my children during lunch or recess to bring them to appropriate remediation for their dyslexia and other learning disabilities. Similar to other people speaking, I pull them out of school, I drive them, I pay for it, I put them back in school because the services that are offered at school are not appropriate. They do not handle the situation that's needed to remediate certain learning disabilities within NUSD, such as dyslexia, dyscalculia, or dysgraphia, which my children all have. Case in point is last summer, I moved my whole family down to Southern California. They went to a specialized summer school. It was cheaper for me to rent a house on the beach and play fun and go to summer school than it is to have specialized tutors in Marin County. This issue is even greater than NUSD. The resources are not here in Marin County to serve the 1 in 5 people who suffer from dyslexia. That's 20% of the population. It's not a unique situation. To put things in perspective, my husband and I have learning disabilities, and thankfully we've been quite successful. It's not that these kids can't learn, it's we don't know how to teach them. It's a teaching problem, not a learning problem. My husband and I, like I said, have been successful in education. I went to Cal Poly, graduated in 3 years. 1 week after my 21st birthday, my husband went to UCLA, got his Juris Doctorate, got his master's in East Asian Studies from Stanford. These kids aren't dumb, and don't disrespect us and tell us that our kids belong in special day classes. The amount of times that I've had NUSD employees tell me that my kids belong in special day classes for learning disabilities is inexcusable. All right, my time's up, but I appreciate this, and I really think that we need to make big changes. Thank you.
Hi, Mariah.
Hi.
So you're going to speak on this?
Yes.
Yeah, go right ahead. Yeah.
Great. Hi, good evening. Sorry, I just zoomed in here. I just finished a meeting 20 minutes ago. My name is Mariah Fisher. I'm the president of the NFT Teachers Union. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here to speak. I'm going to speak in 2 parts, partially as an advocate for the teachers and partially as an advocate for my son. He's in 8th grade. He's autistic, starting San Jose, and desperately wanted to take Spanish. He's been fascinated and fixated, as autistic people are, with the world around him. He's memorized the atlas. He could get me to Wisconsin without looking at a map. He's just spent all summer reading the atlas. And he used to put on the subtitles in languages that we couldn't even read. They weren't even, in our alphabet, because he's just fascinated with looking and learning languages and has wanted to do that forever. And he finally is able to take Spanish in our schools. I pulled him from resource in order to give him this. I'm not sure what it's going to do for him. It's a risk, but it's one that I'm willing to take because in order to keep him loving learning, it's critical that I listen to what he wants as well as try to navigate him through what he needs. I'm enraged, not engaged, about this because he should be able to have access to both. And I know I'm a squeaky wheel because I've been up here, but isn't that horrible that I have been up here asking for our special ed students to have access to what they want and what they need, and it's come to the point where I've taken him out of what he needs in order to give him that. And that's not on the site. Their hands are tied. Now, different hat. As a teacher advocate in our district, I have spent the last 2 weeks stunned by emails I've received from teachers. Our class sizes are too high. SDC middle school at 19, and that's to be appreciated because last week it was slated for 25. 19 middle school students in SDC. She's like tearing apart her room today just to make enough room. And there's not much we can do with what we have because Sinaloa is in the same boat. They're tapped, they're full. And it's really frustrating because there's not a lot in the contract to protect the teachers who need it most, in my opinion. And I really hope that you listen to the parents who came out and you listen to me and you're prepared to hear it a lot because it needs to change. Thank you.
All right, that concludes our non-agenda public comment. Thank you to everybody who came out and spoke, and I know Superintendent Koska has taken some
Debbie,
notes.
Yes. Can I ask one question?
Sure.
Chelsea McCormick, do you know my daughter Melissa Millerick? Yes. Okay. Yes. Yes. Thank you. That's why I recognized your voice and your. Thank you.
All right. It's fine. It's good to make a connection. Yeah. All right. So, like I said, Superintendent Koska has taken some notes here, and your voice has been heard, so thank you for coming out this evening. We appreciate it. We will be moving on into our agenda, though. Moving on to our staff report, the first one is our certificated staffing update. And Jonathan will be coming up. Is it Ferrer? Is that how?
It is.
Oh, okay, good.
Great job.
It keeps going.
Yeah, no relation.
Come on, pumpkin. Since we have a lull, board members hang around at the end of the meeting. We have a signature that's needed on a document for everybody. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Lovely when it works.
There we go.
Good evening, trustees and NUSD community. Jonathan Ferrer, Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources. Thank you for your time this afternoon. I will be going over our certificated staffing update as school is right around the corner for us. So to date, we have hired 34 teachers for the upcoming 2019-2020 school year. Of those 34, 6 are math teachers, 2 science teachers, 2 English teachers, 2 Spanish teachers, 1 social science teacher, and 5 visual and performing arts teachers. At our elementary level, we have hired 3 elementary teachers, as well as 2 dual immersion teachers, 4 special educators, 1 special education program specialist, and 3 speech language pathologists, 2 psychologists, and 1 nurse. In terms of our certificated administrative hirings, we have hired myself. Thank you very much. Also, Director of Special Education and an Assistant Director of Special Education. We have also hired 2 District Administrative Coordinators to work out of Educational Services. Principal at Sinaloa High School, Principal at Rancho Elementary, Assistant Principal at Novato High School, and Assistant Principal at San Marin High School that you approved this evening. Thank you for that. We do have some work to do as school is coming right around the corner. The good news is that 2 of these positions that need to be filled were just filled within the past couple of hours. I did reach out and make offers to a couple of teachers, and they have accepted. So we will be moving 2 of these from the to-be-filled position to the now-filled position. The Spanish teacher has been filled this evening. There is still a vacancy for a math teacher. The English teacher also filled this evening. And we still have a vacancy as for a middle school English history core teacher. ROTC teacher, 1 special educator remains there, and 1 elementary teacher. All of those positions have plans in place to hopefully bring folks in within the next week or so, or having an alternate plan should that not pan out. But we do have those pieces in place already. In terms of our administrator positions that need to be filled, we have a district administrator coordinator specializing in teaching and learning, and those interviews, will take place next week, as well as a director of food and nutrition services next week. Next week will be a busy week for us, and in the week following, a director of maintenance, operations, and transportation. With that, this is our current organizational chart in the district. Obviously, we always start with our students, our parents, and our community. On the left-hand side are our elementary principal leaders. On the right-hand side are secondary principal leaders, the Board of Trustees at the top, Superintendent Casca, as well as the assistant superintendents and their respective departments and individuals under them. I want a huge special thank you to our human resources team for onboarding all of these folks over the summer. And as they are trying to finalize the remaining positions to be filled, they are still working hard, and a couple of them are still here this evening trying to wrap up some loose ends for us. So Marcia, Lillian, Dana, Cindy, and even Ellen have been working very diligently and expeditiously to finalizing all of our staffing needs. And as Trustee Butler mentioned, we had a phenomenal new teacher orientation. It was a great day. So we were glad to bring that passion and that joy to our new teachers that day. So thank you. And I'll take any questions.
Questions, board? Trustee Gila?
Yes, thank you very much for the hard work and trying to get this done soon and quickly, in a timely manner. It was mentioned today about a liaison for special ed, and so I just wondering if you had a comment about that.
So that is not on our radar, but I look forward to speaking with Superintendent Casca as well as Dr. Carter and Director Chrysler on potential opportunities for that position. I've heard from the community this evening, and I think that is a valid discussion for us to start exploring.
Thank you.
Yep. Trustee Cooper?
So welcome.
Thank you.
By the way. Slide number 5, the positions to be filled. So kind of can you talk to if the positions do not get filled right away, what's plan B?
Yeah, so plan B is for our site leaders to work on an internal plan to get those positions covered. That part of that plan might require substitutes in the meantime as we fill positions. Part of that plan might also be using our internal teachers at that site to provide some coverage if they're willing to do that. So those are our immediate emergency kind of backup plans. Mm-hmm.
Any further questions? There's another, first meeting in September, there's another report coming back on enrollment and staffing. So we'll get another update on this. All right. So we'll continue on. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Our next staff report is Partnership with Teachers Pension, and Yancy Hawkins will be presenting.
right. Thank you. We are excited to announce our partnership with Teachers Pension to provide retirement education services to our employees. Since 2013, when pension reform was approved in the state of California, new employees will receive a different level pension than those who started prior to that period. That pension legislation was known as PEPRA, and so you'll hear people talking about classic employees and PEPRA employees. Classic employees were they are employees who receive benefit levels at the pre-2013 levels, and our PEPRA employees are starting after 2013 will receive a lower level of benefits in retirement as part of a way to address the mounting unfunded liabilities and viabilities of our state pension programs in California, those being our California State Teachers Retirement System, CalSTRS, and the Public Employees Retirement System, CalPERS. With that, I would like to introduce the Teachers Pensions team that we have partnered with to give an overview of their services to our employees. And with that, come on up.
Hi, I'm the CEO of Teachers Pension Consulting. Thank you. President Butler, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Koska, thank you for allowing us to just take a few minutes to share a little bit about what we've done for Novato. I'd also like to introduce my team. I've got Dr. Dee Werf, retired superintendent from Napa County. If you can please stand, Bob Lee, retired assistant superintendent of HR from Fremont Unified, Rockland Unified, and Conrad Walker, who is the Novato assigned fiduciary and financial educator for your district. Teachers Pension is exactly what Yancey was saying. We are an education consulting firm. We focus on educating because the simple fact of CalSTRS and CalPERS not being enough. We've identified that the reason for low participation in 403B and 457 supplemental plans is due to the lack of proper education. So what we plan to, and what we have been doing for your school district, the new employee orientation that we were a part of, we've seen a drastic excitement and involvement and engagement in educating them simple things about their Social Security. So many employees, especially certificated, don't know about Social Security and windfall elimination. Our goal and mission is to obviously take care of the employees at the top of this pyramid, making sure that they have a great environment, and then having an educational message, not a sales message, to make sure they understand what they have available. Most employees are retiring with about 56%, this is from CalSTRS, CalPERS website, about 56% of their final year salary. And all the time employees are saying we can barely live on 100% of our salary right now. How are we going to live on only 50 or 60% when we retire? Bridging that income gap is our goal and the goal of every district, to make sure that that income gap that all employees are faced with, and if they get later in time, to make sure that they understand what they can do to bridge that gap through the 403B and 457 plans that the district offers for the employees. Fact of the matter is we see in lots of districts that we partner with, is so many employees don't know what the 403B and 457 is. They don't know what they can do, what they can do and what they can't do. And our goal and mission is to educate them on that. We provide education and cover topics such as on the screen, from their pension reform, the legislation changes, just as Yancey was mentioning. We talk about Social Security, beneficiary options, how much will CalSTRS, CalPERS charge me if I want my pension to continue to my spouse. We especially focus on the gap and all of the other parts of financial wellness that they need to know about. And with that, we're looking forward to continue to providing this service and this education to not only your teachers. I know the name Teachers Pension, don't let that fool you. We focus on classifieds, we focus on administration. We're looking forward to working with M&O and food services and department heads, as well as the administration, to make sure that the employees receive this proper education. Now, what they do with that education is obviously up to them. They can do nothing or they can take action, but we do and have found and identified that with that education, we've seen drastic increases in employee engagement and enrollment rates to help supplement their pension. But with that, I'd like to open it up for any questions that the board may have.
Questions, Trustee Millerick?
Thanks for the presentation, and this is a tough issue. It's my understanding, and I'll say it, and if I'm wrong, you're going to correct me, or Yancey's going to correct me. If you're a teacher and you enroll in the teacher retirement system, that's half your career. You work 20 years doing that, and then you work another 20 years in private sector and earn Social Security retirement. The law in California is that you can only collect one of those two systems. Is that a correct statement?
Let me clarify. So there's a windfall elimination, so there is a proration, right? So if an employee...
Windfall's a weird definition for something you earned and worked for, but...
Agreed. And the government, basically for those employees that qualify for their 40 quarters for Social Security, but also participated in STRS and didn't contribute to Social Security during that time as a teacher, there is a proration, and what's great about it is we'll give those resources to the employees, as there's calculators online where they can put in their numbers and kind of calculate what would they get. Instead of $1,000 a month from Social Security, it might be $300 a month or whatever. There's a proration involved and calculation. But yes, they can get both, but there is some proration and calculation that is done.
Okay, so my retirement program would be work as a teacher until I'm maybe not 62, maybe retired young, 58 or something, and then get a job working at a gas station or someplace that pays pumping gas, which probably doesn't exist anymore, but that's another issue. And then earn Social Security on that, and then I can retire from that job and have both. And you're saying that there's some limits in that?
A lot of employees do that, actually. They'll go back in the private sector after they leave the teaching profession to build that Social Security back up. We see that quite a bit, actually.
Okay, I'd be interested to see how that works. So I think counseling for anybody towards retirement is a valuable thing to be doing. So, thanks.
Trustee Cooper?
Welcome. I think this is awesome. I think any chance we get to educate especially our new teachers, being the father of one, she's definitely going to be looking at this. But how are we going to actually roll this out here in this district? And first part of the question. Second part is the cost factor. If you could just run through that real quickly.
Absolutely, I appreciate that. This is no cost to the district. It is a service.
Yep.
We will provide and roll out, and we customize and tailor that delivery. And we have some districts that require or ask to do it this way and that way, or include this certain content that they are specific to their district. So we do customize and tailor according, and we've been working with Superintendent Koska and Yancey on that delivery. Typically what we'll do is, to start off, we actually did the district office recently, the new hire orientation we were part of. A lot of engagement. It was a really great, well-received message. And then what we'll do is we typically will get the administrative team on the next principal's agenda to make sure that they understand. And then from there, we'll roll it out from professional development days, however the superintendent and Yancey would like to do that.
Okay. That's awesome. That's exciting. Thank you.
You bet.
All right, no further questions? All right. Yep. Trustee Nell.
I just want to get some clarity on the relationship between your company and the district. The way that this is being framed is, and maybe Yancey, you can address this, but we're essentially providing this outside service as an employee enhancement of some kind, some sort of educational opportunity for our employees to learn more about the investment vehicles that are available to them outside of the traditional CalPERS and STRS method. Is that why we're involved with this? I mean,
yeah, we're providing an educational benefit to our employees, as a way to ensure that they have all the information that they need to make their retirement decisions. So, for every one of our employees, there is going to be a gap between their final salary and their retirement salary. And so each of our employees needs to be planning for that time, and whether that is decreasing expenses over time or finding out other ways to fund a portion or all of that gap with Social Security, with 403Bs, with 457 plan. It is important for them to understand that. One of the things I want to note that, and I give the board and my predecessors credit, is not all districts offer 457 opportunities. They can explain it a little bit better than I can, but our employees are allowed to maximize both 403B and 457 opportunities. But there are very specific uses and rules for the use, the deferral of those funds and the use of those funds. And it's important for them to have experts to, make it clear on what those individual things can do. Now, what they choose to do with that education is up to them. But our goal in this process is to increase the level of the percentage of our employees contributing into 403B and 457 programs, and that's twofold. The first is obviously that's an important, part of planning retirement, and we want to be, good financial educators of our staff. The second is to, as we look forward to having a 403B and a 457 plan, the IRS looks at that and looks at the percentages of employees who are engaged in those programs. And that is a potential issue for us to move forward and continuing to offer those plans, is that we are doing that education and we are bringing that level of engagement up as we move forward. So I think it's a key educational benefit that we can offer our employees.
I agree. I think it's a good idea to get this information out. I'm going to assume I'm not that up to date on the specifics of a 403 or a 457. I assume they're related to public employee methods, but they're probably the same concept of it's deferred income that you can take pre-tax from your salary or wages.
Yes.
And that money then has to be deposited into an account that's approved by the IRS as a holding and growth investment type fund. And then that in itself is a whole nother world that I'm assuming that you're going to be educating our employees about. But at the same time, and I think that makes total sense to me, that an organization like Teacher Pension, in exchange for coming in and acting and providing this service for our employees, would be sort of more or less first up for an opportunity to have our employees sign up to have these deductions go in and under their management, is an assumption I'm making. But I want to make sure that at the same time, if we have an employee who wants to sign up for a plan like this but has an alternative investment method in mind, that could be a lot of things. It could be as simple as a CD at a bank, that they're aware that they have options. And I just want to make sure that it's objective. The educational part of this is objectively there's an objective instruction enough so that people can understand that it's not that they have to work with Teacher Pension in order to participate in this federal tax deferral investment plan.
Absolutely. And the employees of Teachers Pensions act as a fiduciary, and I'm going to turn it over to answer.
I'd like to hear about that. Then there's actually someone else acting on behalf of the federal employees because of these particular plans.
Yeah, so on the 403B 457 list that Novato has approved and has a plan administrator to administrate the plan, those have to be approved funds, approved vendors and platforms, right? Fidelity Investments, Vanguard, all these different carriers and investment providers are on Novato's list already. And so we as fiduciaries look at what is available to employees. The money doesn't come to us. We look at that and say, okay, as a fiduciary, what is the best fund lineup based upon their risk tolerance? What's the best option do they have? And when it comes to non-qualified funds, like you were referencing on CDs and savings account, non-qualified funds, it's a whole different world, right? Because you're talking pre-tax and after-tax, qualified versus non-qualified. And so we make sure to fully educate on all their options, doing full comprehensive financial planning. And as a fiduciary, we have to offer the best thing for that employee based upon the environment that the district has available. Every district's environment might be different, and we've been working with Yancey on saying, you know what, maybe that one, their products are not really that great, or maybe that one, hey, you should maybe look at adding some. And so as a fiduciary, we look at that, and we're working with Yancey to take some of that fiduciary liability on to make recommendations and to make sure that the employees receive education about the plan itself and helping in any way we can.
All right. Again, I favor any time that we can do something for our employees and their futures. I do recognize that we have two different types of pension systems, PREPA and, what'd you say you were, Classic?
Classic members and the PEPRA members.
And the PEPRA ones are getting a different deal, and unfortunately, it exposes the problems that we have with our state pension system. So I'm certainly going to take the opportunity to point that out, that it's still a major problem. And this is another way, an equitable situation for many of our employees. So teachers' pension and the solution that's being brought forward tonight isn't going to solve it, but I think it's maybe one more step to just bringing it to the attention of a class of employee that we have, that they're treated a little bit differently and and they have to look out for themselves a little more. So I'll support it.
All right, thank you. All right, moving on to our next staff report. This is the Measure G bond project process and prioritization update. Nancy's got to switch gears and grab the other binder and grab the other paper.
You could go online and not have to carry on all that paper.
That's what our IT director keeps telling me. But as you know, I'm a Classic member, and I like to continue with this paper. All right, thank you. We'll move from retirement to bond planning. Mike Woolard, the Director of Facilities, and myself will be giving the presentation. I'll be giving the financial piece, and obviously he will be giving the technical piece. But to kind of bring us back to this spring, in May and June of 2019, staff brought forward and the board approved a draft plan and timeline for the phase 2 of the Measure G $222 million bond program. The first steps in that process is for the board to look and allocate the remaining funds to the categories noted in the planning. You've seen this graphic before. This represents the coin broken into 4 parts represents the 4 scheduled issuances of the $222 million of bonds. The first of that was issued in 2017 for $51 million. The second series, Series B, is scheduled to be issued this fall, and approximately $53 to $55 million. That's scheduled for a October completion date. That would total approximately $105 million to date that the board will have received. And the remaining approximately $115 million is scheduled to be issued in 2021 or 22 and 2024 or 25. The reason I say or on both of those is that those are subject to the increase in our assessed value. We have a projection of a 4% assessed value growth in all of our projections. And in order for us to issue on the earlier timeline of 2021 and 2024, we will have to continue going up at or above 4% assessed value growth. If not, it will push back to the later timeline of 2022-25, or depending on the adjustment further than that. Up on your screen is a detail of the $105 million in active projects. And when I say active projects, I mean those projects that are already in construction, which is almost all of them, or through schematic design, through architectural schematic design, which basically means the district would be on the hook to lose a lot of money if they change direction on this $105 million. As you can see of this list, it's broken up into the different categories that we discussed this spring. And as you can tell on this list, that the first $105 million is high school heavy. And the projects that we've done have primarily been at the 2 high schools, which most of the students in our district will attend ultimately. One other thing to note is in district-wide includes the IT projects. Those costs will eventually be allocated to their levels, to the elementary, middle, and other level. But those allocations have not been finalized with the design. So those will be moved when that is appropriate. So we have the $105 million of active projects. I also wanted to note the other financially committed dollars. That includes the $10 million of additional IT infrastructure classroom toolkit projects that have been deferred to 2021. Those are through schematic design, and we've spent a large amount of capital on those projects. So we would lose a significant amount of money if we did not move forward with those. Also, the administrative cost and bond issuance costs are costs that are needed to move forward. So this leaves us we have our active plus our commitments of approximately $119 million. That leaves a little bit over $100 million to be allocated to the individual categories. The 3 areas that we know at this point don't have any other projects in them are district-wide, administrative costs, and bond issuance. That leaves our elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, technology, meaning our one-to-one, one-to-world program, as well as our other, which includes the charter school and Marin Oaks Hill Education Center. Given the feedback from this board or several board members over the last couple of months, staff believes it is important to finalize a strategy over one of these categories prior to us moving forward in allocating the additional funds, and that is the area of deferred maintenance. Several board members noted that they believed it is important to have an analysis done of the work that will be required to do over a certain period of time, and look to see if we need to do that prior to moving forward to any new construction or new projects in terms of allocating. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Woolard to describe some of the strategies and to do a little detailed explanation of the deferred maintenance needs in the districts.
Thank you, Yancy. Okay, this is new. The computer's here. Can I move it up? I don't want to break it. I didn't break it. All right. Good evening, Mike Willard, PEPRA member, proud member. Sorry, that was for Yancy. I think I'm the only one in the room that's young enough to not be a classic. All right. I've been called worse. Anyway, I'd like to talk to you all a little bit more about deferred maintenance. As Yancy alluded to, it's a very important topic, and we think kind of the key number to figure out on how we want to move forward and allocate the rest of those funds to those other categories that he just showed you. So for those who aren't familiar with deferred maintenance, what exactly is it? There's a lot of definitions out there about it, but basically it's the practice of postponing maintenance activities in order to save money. It's usually a cost-cutting measure, or you just don't have the funds to begin with to do the proper maintenance. Also, I think I found this in Webster's definition, that usually a policy of continued deferred maintenance may result in higher cost and eventual asset failure. Being from the government and the military, no stranger to this, it's kind of how we operated actually, because we never had enough money. And that definition did hold true. If you didn't put the money into it, it wouldn't work. Great example is changing the oil in your car. I think originally it was every 3,000 miles. Now they've got oil that's every once a year. But if you do it religiously, you invest that $30, $40 at oil changers, and you typically don't have any problems with your car. If you don't do it, about 2 years later, you're in the shop for some new engine parts. So basically, that's the balance of the risk. So how it applies to us, unfortunately, NUSD is a target-rich environment for deferred maintenance, and usually it's because of that. Didn't have enough funding over time. It wasn't actually meant as a joke, but I got Russ laughing. Anyway, so it's a challenge for a lot of big organizations. You just don't have the funds to maintain what you have, and you do the best you can. So some categories up here of what we're looking at for deferred maintenance, or what would fall into it, is roof replacements, just like we did at San Ramon. Was it last year? Gosh, time flies. A year ago, we got that project completed. We have some other roof replacements we just did at Novato High, and we have a lot more out there to be done. Life cycle of a roof is typically 20, 25 years. Some of the new products, you can actually get 30 out of it. We've not seen that on some of our roofs. Utility work, sky's the limit on this one. Electrical, plumbing, mechanical. Fire alarms are a big one for us because we have the most antiquated fire alarm systems out there. Matter of fact, at the two high schools we're working on these new projects, we've had some challenges this week trying to get the portable classrooms ready because we have such an old fire alarm system that only one person can do work on, and it's a continual challenge. It's obsolete. But typically these types of things, it's like in your house. Once you build your house, unless you build it in the 40s or 50s, if you're up to current electrical code, it should last you 30, 40 years. If you bought a house in the 50s and you still haven't changed your electrical right now, you might want to before it burns down because of safety issues and just the advancement of technology and stuff. HVAC replacement. This is not converting like we did at San Jose Middle School and we're doing it at Loma Verde, Linwood, and all of that is a conversion of a heater to a heat pump that adds air conditioning capacity. This is not that. This is San Ramon High School that was built with air conditioning units, and after about 20 years, you need to replace those air conditioning units, condensing units, so that they continue to work, and otherwise you lose efficiency, raise your energy cost, spend more money that way. List goes on, paving, concrete, the very unsexy stuff, cracks, trees growing, root growth, those kinds of things, split your concrete. Pavement just gets worn out over time. Asphalt needs to be replaced a little more often. You're looking at 10 to 15-year life cycles out of those. Flooring replacements, usually large spaces like gym floors. They typically last 30, 40 years if you get the old school wood. But again, you need to sand and do maintenance over those, or the life of those to get that length. Classroom flooring, basic flooring, even if you have 50 coats of wax, and some of our classrooms have, you can get some life out of it, but eventually you need to replace those things even after doing the maintenance. Flooring can anywhere from 5 to 20 years. Exterior coatings, we do a lot of painting. Basic rule of thumb is every 5 years you should, to stay ahead of it, repaint stuff. We usually go around 10 or 15 when it's to the point of failing or peeling to prevent damaging. At some of our school sites, you need to resurface. Again, San Marin's wood-sided. It's now painted, so we have the best of both worlds. We have failing paint and wood. But those things need to be replaced. And just general grounds, fencing, if you want to look at any kind of security fencing, that kind of stuff. Irrigation, we're trying to reduce that at some of our sites, but those are systems that typically last 5 to 10 years and need to be replaced from obsolete parts or just worn out parts, much like your car. So sorry to get into too much detail on that, but that's in essence what we're talking about for deferred maintenance. So next steps, what can we do? Again, basically you've got three options. The one I'm most familiar with from my previous experience is the do nothing, the reactive maintenance, basically fix it only when it fails. This is not preferred by staff. Obviously, it's the cheapest. You only have to fix it when stuff fails, but over the life cycle of any asset, you will spend way more money because you won't get the expected life cycle out of your asset. You just fix it when it's failed. The second option that's acceptable, but again, not the one we recommend, but that's develop and complete a deferred maintenance list through the end of the Measure G bond, which is estimated about 2027. So have us look at all of our sites, and through the next 8 years, develop a deferred maintenance plan for all of our sites. That's a good start, but basically when the end of the bond comes, then you're back to your step, or option one, which is you're back to doing not much kind of reactive maintenance because we just don't have the funding from the general fund. I think you put aside 2 to 3% maybe of our general fund for maintenance operations, routine maintenance.
What percent?
3%. Which I think the industry standard is like 5 now. And then the third option, which we would recommend to give you a complete picture, is pick a future date to be determined past the bond, whether it's 2030, 2035, where you can look at, for example, a roof we just did at San Ramon. It's going to last 20 or 25 years. So if you go 20, 25 years down the road, you'd have, okay, we need to replace that roof and then do the normal routine maintenance through it. But over that 20 years, you can look at all the other things around the school district and figure out what you need to do for maintenance to catch up. So there's 2 positive things coming out of that. One, this would be the best indicator of our true district needs for what do we need to do for deferred maintenance to get out of deferred maintenance and more into preventative and routine maintenance. And also this helps you shape your master plan, which is a living document we need to continually update. So when Measure G bond is over with and at some point you want to go out for another bond to do some more capital improvements, you also have that huge list of maintenance items that you need to do, and you can publicize that to let folks know this is what it costs to maintain these facilities that we have, and also this is what we need to build those new facilities. So those are basically the 3 options that we are looking at, and again, staff is recommending the third one. So next steps, how do we get there? First, I'm working on updating a list of needed deferred maintenance. I've got quite a list from the maintenance staff that Mark Silva had started, and as we get more eyes out on our sites doing our current bond projects, we are noticing a lot of things and making a pretty complete list. So we're working that now, and basically that list will give you sort of the low end amount of deferred maintenance funding that we're going to be asking for. The next step would be to have you kind of tell us which of those strategies I just talked about, those 3 options, which one you want to go with. And that will, again, steer us to how far out we go to look for the maintenance needs. And if we go to the third option I just presented, that would give you sort of the high end of deferred maintenance money that you need for that table that Yancey showed you. And then the third one would be you determine, we present, here's what we recommend, you approve that dollar figure, we plug it into the table, and then that will in turn allow Yancey to calculate out the other categories, and we'll have so much money for elementary schools, so much money for middle schools, so much money for the other categories that you want us to put money in, and that will drive how we spend the remaining bond money on those projects. And the last part I want to mention is, again, as Yancey mentioned, we presented and you guys approved a kind of a draft plan of how to move forward on this next phase of planning. Taking a little more time to focus on the deferred maintenance portion, it will delay that schedule we talked about a month or 2 as we get the data. I think the best way it's summed up is a Chris Koska quote. So hopefully you're not nervous about what I'm about to say, but he actually says this in many different ways, but basically we are committed to doing it right more than we are committed to doing it fast. So we think it's well worth the extra couple months to get this right, so we don't have to continually go back and go, well, what about that maintenance or what about that deferred maintenance? So if we kind of take a holistic look based on what time frame you tell us or direct us to do, we come back and give you recommendations, and then we set that dollar figure, and then we move forward, kind of plug and play and figure out the rest of it. So with that, I'm going to put Yancey back up here to answer all your questions.
All right. Questions from the board? Trustee Miller, then Trustee Mack.
So thanks. There's a piece of information that I would like to have as we go through this, not tonight, but over the next few meetings that we consider this. The Novato School District looks to the community to fund the construction programs. And historically, schools have looked to the state to fund construction programs and maintenance programs. And the first bond measure, I think we passed a bond, we passed a $107 million bond, in my memory, but we got about another $30 million on top of that and that's, like I said, from my failing memory, that we were able to use to do work beyond what our original scope was. And some of that was deferred maintenance that the need wasn't obvious until we were 5 or 6 years in, and then buildings were failing in ways no one had predicted, and we were able to use those extra funds. Since then, we have asked the community to provide funding for the district, and we are currently asking the community and committed the community to put $60 per $100,000 assessed evaluation. We are at the absolute top amount of money that we can get from the tax base in this town. This community is contributing at the highest level, plus a parcel tax on top of that. So my concern is not, so the question is, two questions. How far into the future have we committed the Novato taxpayers to pay the maximum $60 per $100,000 based on the money we have now that we've already pulled and the money that we have authority to pull, the next two bond pulls? How far into the future does that commit the community to pay $60 per $100,000 and therefore prohibits us from going back to the community? Even if a school burnt to the ground, we couldn't ask for more money because we're limited. So I would like that data. And the other is the part linked back to the first part of the conversation is, are there any state funds that we see on the horizon that may assist us in serving the kids of Novato? There has been historically. Is there any that you see in the future? And that would help me understand how we would approach this strategy. Thank you.
So I can answer the first question, and if there's additional information, I can get that to you. Our bond issuances are 25-year bond issuances. And so from 2017 going out 25 years is the full $60, and then it will decline after that relatively significantly for each of the next issuances as they fall off. So 25 years plus the time between the first and the last issuance, but that at a lower rate than at the $60 limit. So $60 for 25 years, and then a declining amount.
Through 2042, we've used up all our availability.
So I did want to clarify on that. So there are two restrictions on bond issuance in the state of California. The first is an overall bond indebtedness percentage. For unified districts, that's 2.5% of the assessed value in our district. If we issued all $222 million this fall, which we can't from the second restriction, I'll note, we would still be under that total amount that we can issue per the state. And so as we grow an assessed value, that amount under the 2.5% cap, which I can get to the board, will grow as well. The second is under Proposition 39, which is the school district Measure G was approved under. And that allows school districts to go out for school bonds at 55% rather than the 2/3% that the old school bonds go under. And basically every school district goes under Prop 39 bonds. That restriction is the $60 per 100,000 that you are noting. That restriction only is in response to the measure that it's passed under. So Measure G can never be above $60 per 100,000 of assessed value. If the voters chose to approve a different bond measure, if we had like Trustee Millerick noted, a school burned down, it's each approved bond, as long as we are under that 2.5% of assessed value. Now, we don't have a lot of room under our that 2.5% as of right now. So it's not that we could go out and say we need another $222 million in a couple of years. That just won't be available to us. it'll have to, the assessed value roles will have to grow until we can do that. To your second question on state funding, the bond and the construction program is planning to bring an item this fall on potential state bond funding. We are excited that we were approved for the San Marin STEM building for a competitive state bond grant of a little under $1.5 million for the biotechnology CTE competitive grant funding. And that's especially, important to us because of the hard work done by that program and by our staff to really show the wonderful growth and needs of that program at the state level, which gave us to that. One thing I will note is Trustee Millerick noted that we had a lot of money in the first bond of that 107. We were able to really leverage that to receive a lot of state bond funding. There's good news and bad news in that. The good news is obviously we received a lot of state funding and we really maximized that. The potential bad news is we've used up a lot of that eligibility that we have at the state level. And as of right now, there's no more funding at the state to send out funding. There is likely going to be state bond measures on the 2020 and 2022 election, but that's obviously subject to the whims of the voters of the state of California.
Trustee Mack? Yep.
Thank you. Those answers were very illuminating. It helps me to understand that. Just shifting gears back to the reserve, or the deferred maintenance reserve, if you will. Curious if, two questions really. One, does this district have any history of doing anything like that ever before? And two, what are we seeing in the rest of Marin County in this regard?
So we do have a history in the last bond program as funds were a lot of really deferred / reactive maintenance projects were included in that bond.
But it wasn't like a sustained reserve. It wasn't
a
reactive.
sustained reserve. It was during that program and with the state bond funds, as Trustee Millerick noted, we did a lot of work in the early to mid 2000s to replace HVAC equipment, to do lighting upgrades, to do other flooring upgrades, those things. And as you noted, if a project was done in 2005 and it's an HVAC project, just like if you have a heater in your house from 2005, you're probably going to assume sometimes in the mid 2020s, you're probably going to have to replace that heater. Now, as my inspector when I bought my house noted, your heater is 25 years old. It might work for another 5 months or for another 5 years. I can't tell you that, but I can tell you in the near future, you're going to have to replace it.
But the point being that NUSD's never had a established reserve for sustained, ongoing.
We've had a minor reserve. We have a Fund 14, which is our deferred maintenance, which currently holds about $1.4 million, $1.5 million in it. It was part of a state program that they, back before the Great Recession, they would help fund. If we put aside a certain amount for deferred maintenance, they would match that amount of about $250,000 a year. We still continue to put aside that $250,000 out of the 3% that we noted, and that funds deferred maintenance projects throughout the district. Now, that may be able to fund some paving projects, some painting projects, those kind of things. But the San Ramon roof project was a little less than $2 million. So one roof for an elementary school would take out that entire fund, and we'd have to wait 5-6 years to do another one. So yes, we have done that. Other districts in Marin County have similar, but it's all over the map on what they do.
I guess I would ask this: when you come forward with your plan, it'd be great if you have real-world examples of other districts and how it worked out for them over, say, 10, 20 years. In other words, look to real-world examples and how it works, how they stay positive, they don't go negative. They stay afloat, and one repair job doesn't completely wipe them out.
Yep, absolutely.
Trustee Nell and Trustee Cooper.
So maybe some questions about the detail within a deferred maintenance plan, and I'm kind of still trying to struggle with what we call a capital asset replacement plan, which is where we take a certain amount of our earnings and place them in a reserve fund because we know that the furnace is going to burn out in 10 years. So we divide that cost by 10 years, just for inflation, and then we set aside that money, and that money sits in a reserve and earns interest. Theoretically, it's not a lot of that these days, but but this in the public sector, this is it's called deferred maintenance, but there are items in it that appear to be capital replacement. So I'm just trying to get a feel for the detail of what's going to be in our deferred maintenance plan. Will it have replacing the high school pool in it, for instance? It's a $100 million pool. We know it's only going to last 50 years. 100 million divided by 50 years, are we setting, well, I know we're not, but my point is, so like that's a big example, or are we going to, and we're going to have it all the way down to, we got to do siding on a particular building. How much detail are we going to have in this? Or are we going to be speaking in more general terms, like we're going to set aside $2 million for paint, $4 million for paving, and these items are going to be determined later? Or there will actually be an inventory list that says this particular parking lot, this particular building siding? That's the one I'm kind of looking for, asking how much detail.
So our plan is to bring something much closer to a detailed level of, we have a listing of all of our HVAC, so our heaters or air conditioners throughout the district. We know what year they've been put in. We know the useful life of those devices. We know the relative cost, and we can assume a certain inflation cost on that. And we can say in 2025, we believe the district needs to replace X number of units at a cost of this. When you take that cost and extrapolate it out to $2,025, this is what that would be.
Extent of capital, the size. So would you put a theater in the deferred maintenance, the replacement of a theater in the deferred maintenance plan? So where do you guys stop it? Do we stop at heaters and furnaces?
We stop at full building or project replacement. So the replacement of the Performing Arts Center at San Marin that we demoed on Monday, because it was 50 or 60 years old and it didn't meet its use, we wouldn't include that. But the component parts, any component part of a building, so the roof, the HVAC equipment, the flooring, those things are what would be included in deferred maintenance, but not the actual replacement of a building.
So my last question is going to be related to excellent idea. This is actually going to give us an idea of what deferred maintenance capital replacement costs are going to be. So then we're going to be able to develop our budget around these things. So unfortunately, we're probably going to be looking at circumstances where we really got to set aside money to fix these things. We got special education issues. We got climate change and need air conditioning. We got step and column pay increases. We got pension assessments. So this is going to be a tool for us to look at, and as fiduciaries, we're going to be able to analyze this and help to set our priorities against all these things on an equal yet accurate way.
Yes, that is the plan.
All right, thank you.
Trustee Mack wants to add to that.
If I would add, it's more of a request. When you start putting together a plan, if you could please look into the possibility of tying rental income from specific facilities to the deferred maintenance line items for those facilities. I don't know how realistic that is. I strongly suspect that's not enough, but at least we can start tying those together and getting a sense for whether we need to charge more for rental or not, but at least you know the magnitude of the issue. So like whether it's for rental of the PACs, classrooms, fields, whatever, but just to basically segregate those into where they would eventually be spent.
I can tell you, it won't be enough, but I do think it's going to be an important part. This board later this year
Visibility,
will
though.
see.
Yeah.
It's been almost 9 years since the district has updated its facility use rates. That's going to be a project that the business and operations team is taking on this year. And I think that's very important for two reasons. It's been 9 years and we need to update it, but we're also about to bring on some of the most exciting assets we've brought on in the last 30 years. And so we don't have any, facility use rates for a 450-seat state-of-the-art theater. So we're going to have to do that along with updating our other rates.
Well, it's just that I'm concerned that in the past, those funds have been just dropped into the general fund and they disappear. And I think it's really important for us to decide whether we want to continue doing that, or do we want to isolate those funds into specific accounts related to each of the facilities they support, or not, or some hybrid thereof.
Trustee Cooper?
Yeah. Great idea. We have been talking about this for many moons. I think since, for me, the first turf field is Novato High.
Right.
We talked about it then.
The old
Well, we knew in 10 years we were going to have to replace it. Let's put some money aside, but we never did. I think this is really, really a great topic, and I'm glad you guys brought it up or brought it forward. I know we've talked about it here before. But I think it's also, so it's protecting our assets, so we're taking care of our property. That's great. We should do that. But I think it also sends a message to the community at large that we are in fact doing that. They trusted us with the money to do those projects, and now we're taking care of them as we should, because when they go by, for example, San Marin High, and they look at the siding of that building, yeah, it's not a pretty picture. So let's do this. I'm happy.
Trustee Gasson?
So I'm not sure if, I like this. I'm huge about doing stuff proactively rather than reactive because of the additional expense and just all that. So I'm actually really am looking forward to seeing the entire list of things for deferred maintenance and figuring out exactly how much that's going to cost. When I look at this more globally, one of the things when you're doing that, I want to make sure that we're looking at things even to the extent, I'm trying to figure out if this is crossing over or not. The kids' safety and just equity, and that comes up in the context of having everybody at the same place. Having each, when you're looking at this, that we're all in the same, that all the schools are at the same basic situation. Obviously, if somebody just got a new HVAC 4 years later, you're never going to match up the timing exactly. But when we talk about replacement, making sure that we are looking at that. But I also take it to another level when I mention safety, bathrooms. That's something to me that maybe doesn't come up as deferred maintenance, but it's a huge issue at both of the campuses my girls are at. We just had ours redone at Pleasant Valley because of concerns and, things to that. I know it's kind of taking it down maybe too far, but getting everybody, all the schools and locations so that for health and safety reasons that they're all the same. So I have on my list the bathrooms, the kitchens, the PA system at PV, I'm told is fixed. When my kids started in kindergarten, you couldn't hear anything in the kindergarten thing. And to me, that's what I noticed as a parent, and I don't know if every school has a PA system where every single room and area it can be heard. But that kind of thing, again, I don't know if it falls into deferred maintenance so much. Well, just getting everything back up to where it should be, especially in this day and era of, having all these emergencies and things, with regards to that, and actually hearing about the fire alarm, whatever that is, those kinds of things, making sure that we have those on the list.
One area I did want to clarify around our fire alarm systems are work and are tested and are approved each and every year. The issue that Mike brings up is that we use a proprietary technology that is older. And so when it needs to be fixed and it needs new parts, it's much more expensive than if we had an updated system. So we're not obviously compromising any safety issues there. But I did want to clarify that, and I knew that's what Mike meant. But I did want to say, in terms of fixing it, it's costing us more, as he noted, to kind of reactively fix these systems because they're probably past the life that you would want the the systems to have to repair them because they're costing more now.
Right, okay. So the rest, I'll just wait until the list, but I have a real concern about making sure that we're not, focusing on things just because they're broken, but also like making it, like your house, you want the bathroom to work, the kitchen, just all that too, where it may not be a deferred maintenance thing like it exists, but that it's sufficient to make it so our schools can function well, so.
Trustee Miller?
So there's some significant challenges the 7 of us face and the people who will replace us face. We're not going to be here, all of us serving for the duration that we're going to plan for. This deferred maintenance list is going to go out, say 2040, so 20 years out. You'll tell us, but it's longer than some of us will, our terms will end. If you take revenue from renting a ball field or a pool or any event, that money is general fund money. And as much as we would like to say, well, the Performing Arts Center the revenue for it should be set aside, it's general fund money as a matter of law. That money is sitting in the reserves, and when we sit down to negotiate our teachers' union contracts, and they look at our overall budget, that money is reserves. And we know that there's pressure not to have reserves while salaries are depressed in Novato below the standard for Marin County or whatever the conversation is, the state of California, whatever that conversation is. There are significant pressures that come to bear that this board has to deal with, and this superintendent, welcome, you knew this when you took the job, to deal with. And to the extent that you're able to work ahead and have some reserve capacity in case of an emergency, it's easy at the next election for somebody to decide we need turf fields at San Marin to match Novato and air conditioning at each building, and to take those reserves and after the next election on December 15th, spend them all, and the reserves are gone, and they're not used for the purposes that this board would have imagined that they be used for. So that ability for us to build that kind of capacity needs to be, it's hard to do, and we'll lead the community in having them think through that spending every penny you got is not a good idea, that having those kinds of capacities is sound fiscal policy, and we can defend against the last person that got to the podium and wants the money and be able to have that conversation. It is a big challenge, and Novato has done it well for a while. As we have this conversation, we need to have a plan collectively to govern this, not just to have a plan for the cost, but to have a governance plan that we all adopt and believe can hold up. Because it's, as you know, the last thing you want to do is have a football field closed down because the carpet tore and you don't have any fund to replace it. Now a great facility is failed for the lack of one piece, or a roof leak and all the joists underneath it are rotting out, and you got a $300 million or a $3 million repair when you should have had a $100,000 patch. So anyhow, we're walking in ground that's very hard, and it is our job, 7 of us, to do this. And I'm looking forward to the conversation, but nothing's easy about what's coming. So there's my 2 cents.
That was 4 cents. And you're going to be here in 20 years, so. Trustee Nell.
So originally I wanted to respond to a few things that Trustee Mack said and then Trustee Cooper. But I did want to say that Trustee Gasson's comments about the bathrooms and the list of things that she cited and reasonableness around equity, or is as much evenness as we can at every site. I mean, I can imagine that's going to be the goal, and those kind of specific things will be part of this conversation, and it'd be nice to have dollars associated with all of them. This is one of these moments where Trustee Miller and I are in agreement when it comes to categorized revenue concepts. You know, I think it's fair. The value of this document is that it's transparency and it's information that we need. There's a lot of logic to like, hey, you know, we're renting out the field. Those dollar amounts should go to the capital replacement cost or the maintenance operation of that particular item. I can see that logic and apply it. However, I would just caution us against mapping and creating our own categoricals where we basically are tying our hands and then we can't deal with the realities of special education, for example, or other things that might come up. So I think Trustee Miller's also right about the use of general funds, how they're designated, and it's up to us on an annual basis to determine how to disperse those funds. Now, with that said, I'm sure the Chief Financial Officer won't have a problem breaking out those revenues for us. So as part of this report and any other report, I think it's fair to see the dollar amounts that are coming in through the rentals of these facilities, et cetera, as part of any conversation. I might even be open to, you know, areas around a percentage of those dollars should be prioritized or put into it. But as much as I'd like to force myself to take those monies and to put them in a particular account, I think that one, it would be difficult to do, and that we would find ourselves in a worse predicament. There was Trustee Gasson's comment about the speakers. I think that might be a real life example about Chris, our new superintendent's statement about being committed to doing it right, because there's nothing worse than putting in something new, purchasing speakers at a really great deal, only to find out if we'd spent a few bucks per speaker more, they probably would have lasted more than a year or something like that. So being penny wise but pound foolish isn't what we want either. And I think when it comes to speakers and PAs in this school, I think maybe we did that. So that's just an example, but it's a real one about penny wise, pound foolish, in my opinion. So, all right, thank you.
All right, Trustee Aguila.
So thank you for bringing this forward, and I wanted to just make sure that Yancy, as you're making things more clear for us, wanting to know if you could also do that like publicly, in a transparent manner. Like, I know things are up on the website, and just to make sure that to keep that updated. And are we having that in Spanish too? Do we have? I don't think so, but some of it is, right? Not everything.
Some of the documents we put up on the bottom
Right.
website, we do both, but not all.
But thank you for doing the best that you can, and I'm sure like later on it'll get better and better. Just don't use Google Translation. That's just not good. As far as I've had someone come up to me regarding the San Jose 3-panel sink. So is that included too?
That actually is work that we're working with the health department to finalize in the coming months. So we've already gone out there. Yes.
And you're working on that.
We're already working on that. That won't be included in the plan because it'll already be done.
Great. Thanks.
State it again, Maria. What was the San Jose?
San Jose's 3-sink panel.
What panel?
It's a specific project,
panel sink?
a project that at San Jose, a small maintenance project that we're doing over there in conjunction with the health department.
Okay.
Very important. Small dollar signs, not small in terms of importance.
Well, and it's a health issue too. So.
Okay, so staff has brought this report forward, and to give us the details of how they're going to take the next steps. I think there's agreement that you're.
So yeah, our goal in the next month and a half would be to bring back a more detailed list that goes out those numbers of years. And obviously, as Mike noted, we would like to be as conservative as possible, but we also need to see those numbers, before we make a recommendation to the board on how much to allocate to deferred maintenance. And I think those decisions will become much clearer as we see the upcoming costs for those different projects. The other thing, just to be clear, is some of the projects that are in the bond also include a deferred maintenance component. So if we were doing an update at one of our elementary schools, we would almost assuredly update the HVAC equipment at that school. So some of the money needed for some of those projects might not necessarily be needed. We wouldn't be double counting those. So that is one piece.
All right, we'll move on. Thank you very much. This is our last staff report. This is the PG&E Public Safety Power Shut Off.
I'll launch it from here. So we are working, well, we went into the year knowing that we needed to work on a plan for dealing with smoke, as that's been an issue over the past couple of years, and then we realized that the heat is very closely associated with the smoke, and we have some classrooms and some schools without air conditioning, so we needed to have a heat plan and a smoke plan. And then we got this curveball that's very much associated with smoke and heat, which is the PG&E Public Safety Power Shutoff plan. And so we've been working closely with all of the key agencies here in Novato to work on this plan. It is still a work in progress, as is our smoke plan and our heat plan. I do want to say to the community that even though we haven't brought thorough plans for these 3 different areas to the board for approval, we have the authority from the board to make decisions that we need to make based on excessive heat or excessive smoke or what we do in the event of a PG&E power shutoff. So I want to make sure that the community knows, even though we haven't brought that plan forward, we have the authority to make those critical decisions. Tonight we're going to talk specifically about the PG&E Public Safety Power Shutoff. I'm working on that, PSPS. This is going to be a 3-headed presentation, more than likely, with support from myself and Yancey and Leslie Benjamin. So Yancey will start us off. We will jump in as needed.
All right. Thank you very much. This is a complicated issue, so there might be need some jumping in for support here. Thank you for updating. As you've surely heard, PG&E is implementing public safety shutoff program. In certain conditions, PG&E will be turning off electricity over a portion of their electric grid and the power lines for safety purposes in order to hopefully prevent fires and related issues with that. To that extent, they've set up 3 tiers, 3 zones that folks live in. Tier 1, that's pretty much the normal. Tier 2, which is at an elevated fire risk, and Tier 3, which is an extreme risk. On the screen here is a map of northern Marin County, and the white areas are Tier 1. The yellow or the orangey yellow areas are Tier 2. Those elevated or escalated areas, and the red area is the extreme danger. We don't have any schools in the red area for extreme danger. We do have 2 schools that are currently located in their maps as an escalated or elevated risk. Those schools are San Jose Middle School and Loma Verde Elementary School.
Risk of power eruption or
Fire. But they're going to be related.
Tier 2.
But they're going to be related in the sense of they're going to be much more cautious in the higher fire risk areas when looking at potentially shutting down. Here I want to just note and pause a second to note that this program from PG&E is changing and being updated on an almost daily basis. As they're looking forward to implementing this major change in how they do business due to the wildfires and hopefully lowering the risk of those moving forward. So this is really just the first time that we're going to be here. We're going to be here later as this evolves and as our response with our partners that I'll get to in a second evolves into a final plan that I'm sure also will be evolving as the program evolves. So we have partnered with several organizations, including the Novato Police Department, the Novato Fire District, the Novato Sanitary District, the North Marin Water District, the City of Novato, and the Humane Society, amongst to have a Novato Public Safety Power Shutoff partnership. So we are working with those agencies as well as with PG&E, the County of Marin, and the Marin County Office of Education to determine appropriate plans. Something I wanted to, sorry, I should have noted before. These outages are projected to potentially last over 48 hours. And one thing that happens is once they've turned off the power to these lines, they have to inspect every foot of line before they're going to turn this back on. So this might not be a couple hours. This could likely be 48 hours or more. Our outcome is the outcome, from our partnership is pretty simple. It's a playbook for addressing these issues as they come up, and we'll be working together on that. Specifically, the next steps for NUSD, along with working with this partnership, is completing an analysis of the systems that are going to be affected by a power outage during of certain durations. So a power outage of a couple hours versus a couple days versus a week or longer, there's different levels of service. We have a generator at the district office. We may or may not need to purchase additional generators to do that. The one constant is we cannot run school without water. The state government does not allow us over a certain amount of time to run school, but we're going to need to determine how long we believe that we can run school without power and other related systems, including our tracking systems, phone systems, et cetera. And so we'll be bringing that. So, the first one was completing the analysis of systems affected by a power outage under certain durations. And secondly, and most importantly, is developing the development of plans. And that's going to be multiple plans related to multiple different durations that based on that analysis, and then communications to the public and our parent community and our students and our staff of those plans as we move forward. Did I catch everything? All right. Well, with that, I'm happy to open it up to questions.
Trustee Gasson.
So thank you, Yancy. I appreciate this being on the agenda today. I've actually attended both of the events that were held at the City Council. One of the things that, and I know that Trustee Cooper was there as well, one of the things that they highlighted this last time, and I want to reiterate because I think it puts a little bit different perspective on it, even though we only have 2 schools that are in a higher level tier. I'll use my house as an example. I actually live on the cusp of, I'm in 2 and I live on a cusp of 3. Where my property is probably the power is probably fed through Pleasant Valley, the transmission lines through Pleasant Valley School from that area. So if our area is, at risk, the transmission lines going through that area are inevitably going to be turned down. They won't really specify exactly where things go or if they're going to reroute stuff, but I don't want to presume that just because we've only got 2 schools that are in a higher danger area that it couldn't happen to any of our schools. You could be in an area 1 and still have your power turned off because of where the transmission lines go.
Absolutely.
So just for clarification for the board. The second thing that I learned on this last meeting, which was interesting, because the first one they had talked about, everyone's still trying to get their plan together. The water was the issue, figuring out how the water district was going to deal with a power outage. And I think 48 hours is being conservative, that's what we would be out. It's going to probably be longer depending on how big of an area. But the water district's current status is that they would fill their tanks, and we have a gravity. We're fortunate to have gravity that would, allow water to go to houses and stuff like that. But depending on usage, I was thinking, if my area was out and downtown Nevada's not, they may not be as conservative with their water. And so there's only about a 24 to 48 hours supply of water. So we're looking at just a couple of days. So just additional information to put it into context, because I think, I don't know, I was like, at the time was like, oh, we can go downtown or what, but it's going to be a big deal. It's really, and that little power outage that we had recently overnight, my husband made fun of me, but I drove down because I get no cell reception. So those little alerts to tell you what happened, I had no idea. I mean, I just don't know. So I'm in my pajamas, barefoot, driving around, trying to wait till my phone goes ping, 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 and tells me what's going on. So I think it freaked out enough people that we're all getting ready for that and anxious to hear how we're going to deal with, our kids in schools and stuff. So.
Trustee Miller?
We're going to have a limited amount of funds to be able to respond to this, and I think we don't actually know the kind of response that we need right now today. I think it's something we need to be building a plan for, and everything from very short term, the power went down, I need to call my ride to get me out of school, my cell phone should work, or my Wi-Fi should work because I'm going over the Wi-Fi network. Some of that first 4-hour questions are pretty classic IT infrastructure reliability issues, but it's new to be having conversations about 24 or 48 hours. The pumps aren't running for the water district. Those are new considerations. There may be times when, as a public agency, we as the school district become the resource that people turn to in an emergency. That's one of the duties of a public school. And so our gymnasiums and public spaces will be called upon to provide response to a community-wide issue. So we need to be thinking about how that role might occur and what we think an appropriate response that we should have ready. Is it a generator set at both high schools that can at least light the gymnasium at night? Or, I don't know. But I think we got a whole long list of what ifs that are going to get clarified by all kinds of communities around the state over the next 2 years or so. And PG&E's facing bankruptcy. The forests are drying out. They can't do enough maintenance to stay ahead of those kinds of risks. It's going to be a sea change in the way we deal with stuff. It's not going to be, they'll figure it out, it'll be okay next year. This is a significant structural change in the way our society responds. So I'm not ready to go spend 10 cents on any of this, but I would love to have you start making lists of every place we might have to defend and our role as a public agency and how that would happen.
Superintendent Koska has a comment.
So a couple of comments. In our planning, we're working from an assumption that if there's a power shutoff in our community, that it's going to affect the whole community because we're part of a bigger system in the grid. So all of our plans are planning from it being large scale, and if it's smaller scale, we can deal with that on the smaller scale. Yancey talked about the potential of a shutoff. They say the shutoffs can last up to 48 hours. They also talk about how once the red flag warning ends and they believe that it's time to start restarting the systems, they won't re-energize any of the system until they've inspected everything that's been shut down, and that can take up to 5 days for them to inspect those lines. And so you think about a large red flag event that takes out Yolo County, Solano County, Napa County, Sonoma County, Marin County. That's a lot of lines to inspect. So this is a significant problem. We have talked with our partners in Novato. The way that they anticipate needing us as a partner is that as we have a generator here, it's important to note that because people have electricity, they can still stay in their home. And they don't have electricity, they can still stay in their homes. They don't necessarily need a place to go and sleep. What they need is a place to be able to go and charge, and so to be able to charge their devices. Of course, that's dependent upon cell systems even being active, because a lot of the cell phone towers locally have, at this point, 6-hour battery backups. So after 6 hours, cell service could start to fail. So this is all a work in progress. In our talking with with the municipal water district, they said, water to our schools shouldn't be an issue initially. Now, how long are they going to be able to confirm that goes? They've got to work on those projections. But because of the locations of our schools, they don't have a specific concern about water. So this is where it's great that we're working with our partners and we're getting the answers to these questions, and we'll continue to work with them as we map out this plan.
Trustee Aguila?
So I'd like to agree with Trustee Gasson that it's not only like one school to, my niece goes to Loma Verde, and, we need to, so what? We need to focus on all schools and all community departments as well. So actually, so with that, I know that this report doesn't have recommendations, but I would like to give a recommendation that we also reach out to, I'm glad that we have like the Humane Society. There's several populations that I worry about, people that you can't defend yourself, the animals and the seniors. So I'm a little bit worried that we haven't reached out to Margaret Todd, and I'm sure that we could reach out to them somehow. Today I had lunch with our Fire Chief Bill Tyler, and he actually was talking about some of the services that we may not be aware of that they do. And so not only can they reach out to the seniors, but also I think that it's important that maybe we and NUSD can reach out to our community, some of our parents, where maybe they're not aware that some of the services that the fire department does. So for example, they can go to your home and talk about fire prevention and how to use a fire extinguisher and teach CPR, and they have a fund where they can match up to $500 if you need to get rid of wood, if you need to clean up. They will match up for whatever you can. So, so one thing is, could we reach out to Margaret Todd? And the second thing, that goes with this, is how are we letting the community know about some of the services that the fire department does? And when we do let them know, just to make sure that they also, when they go to your home, they can go with somebody that speaks Spanish, and also no immigration questions will be asked. So that's important for our parents to also be aware of that. And so I just wanted to just give out a thank you to our fire department. And that's it.
I'll jump in at this point. Thank you, Maria. You bring up some excellent points. And I know in being at some of these Novato partnership meetings, they have one group that's really focused on communication and developing those communications. And we haven't received those yet. And so I've been talking with them. And as soon as they have those ready to go out to community, I'm going to help them get it out to all of our parents as well. So it'll be a concerted effort on getting that information out to the community.
Right. And with the Margaret Todd, they have a group called Alma Latina, and they're the Hispanic person, and I can give you the contact information. Sylvia would be the person. But I think it's important that,
Right, and I'm wondering, since Margaret Todd is under Park and Rec and City of Novato, that may be sort of the best way for them to get that information out, because they probably have lists of all their members there, which we don't. So that may be an avenue.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter how, just that we do it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Trustee Cooper and then Trustee Gasson.
Hey, Yancy, would it be, or Leslie, would it be smart to put any of this information up on our website, kind of I'm at our website right now, I don't see it, but like this map, I know it's not our purview, but maybe our parents go to us.
Yeah, it would be totally appropriate. I have been waiting from the city on their information, but we can certainly, start something.
Just as a resource to our community particularly. They might go somewhere else, but they may be looking to us.
I would basically just be linking everything to PG&E.
That's all it would be,
and maybe it's just doing that, is putting something out, that if all your information, because they really have a wealth of information about this.
Yep.
PSPS.
Build on it once we get our plan in place.
Yes.
Cool. Thank you.
Trustee Gasson?
So, Yancy, to take it like even further, I know that we're working on it for district-wide, and you mentioned MCOE, also their involvement. I'm just wondering, in the context of what they're developing, my concern is that we're potentially looking at several days of school being closed,
Yep.
and loss of revenue. And I know we've had a school closure before, and we were able to get it waived. We didn't have to make it up or whatever. So has there been discussion about having like snow day kind of things added on in the future? Is planning, there's two segments. There's what are we going to do now and what are we going to do for the future? Because I don't think this is going to go away.
So in the past, the waivers have been intermittent enough that that the state has not required us to make up those days. That might change, and I think we're going to know over the next couple of years if we're losing 1, 2, 3, 4 days a year due to fire shutoff. I don't, maybe more, maybe less. The state, if they start seeing a pattern, they will expect us to add on additional days, optional days that the board may need to use that process. I think it's going to be important over the next couple of years to get that data to see if this is a common occurrence or a less than common occurrence, and how many days that we will be missing. But yeah, that process is available. But if it becomes consistent enough, like snow in the Lake Tahoe area, they need to put in additional days into their calendar, and we may have to look at that in the next couple of years after we get more data.
I think even if it wasn't just PG&E, we've got these really hot days, the 100-degree week that we had, then you've got the smoke days. I know it's all just, but I was thinking that's more at the MCOE level, correct? That they would dictate that,
That comes from the state. Would come.
But wouldn't they make, okay, well, that's okay. If it's somewhere on the radar.
School closure is what you're talking about, once we decide to close the
Well,
school?
just the fact that if we have several but I guess if it goes to the state, I was thinking it went to MCOE, making a determination if we should factor in extra days for our particular area because of, all of these
The state would likely work with MCOE to help support
'Cause
districts in that case, but it would be, our request would go through the state.
Right, because it's not at our level, though.
It's not at our level.
Right, okay,
We don't
thanks.
have that authority.
Thank you.
Trustee Miller?
So simply, Chris or Yancey, you have friends at Sonoma County Office of Education and Santa Rosa City Schools who will be able to give us all kinds of detail about what do you do in a catastrophe, the unexpected closures. We have it right next door. You might as well just a simple ask and then tell us.
Yeah, we're actually a little bit ahead as far as this PSPS stuff due to the quickly emerging partnership in Nevada. We're in that regard, we're ahead. We could certainly learn a whole awful lot from them about how to deal with emergent situations around fire, should that happen. But in this area, we're a little bit ahead right now.
All right, I want to thank staff for bringing this forward. There's more information to come, and this is just a jumping off point, and they have been working on this since spring of this spring of this year. And I know a heat plan will be coming forward to the board as well. So we'll definitely be keeping us informed, and next up is keeping the community informed as well. I know you're working on that, so thank you. All right, we'll jump into our discussion action items. Our first item is the parcel tax pulling and next steps. I'll turn it over to Yancy.
You can't get rid of me.
No.
Sorry. So with that, in April of 2009, the board engaged TBWB and Godme Research to conduct a survey to assess potential voter support for an extension of the 2014 parcel tax. With that said, Brian Godbe from Godbe Research and Charles Heath from TBWB will be here to give a presentation on the results from that survey, some analysis of those results, and the potential next steps and the direction needed from the board. With that, I will turn it over to Brian Godbe.
And then just to say, Charles and Brian have been working with this district for many years on several of our parcel tax extensions and renewals and our bond, and so. Has it been all? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, as Ross pointed out, I first started a survey project in 1990 for the district, which was led to the 1992 first parcel tax. So, you can't get rid of me, Ross. You're right.
Not trying to.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're here. Thank you, sir.
All right, so diving into this particular one, let's see. Where am I pointing? I'll just use do it the old-fashioned way, yeah. Okay, as you know, the purpose of the survey was to look at a variety of different things. We began with perceptions of the district and how your quality of education is perceived, how the voters feel you're managing public funds, and then seeing if they agree or disagree that the district needs additional funding. We, of course, in the central part of the survey, assessed potential support for a new parcel tax measure. We looked at a variety of different programs that the money might be spent on. There were also informational and critical statements as well, which tested various levels of support. And we also looked at different rates, as well as, of course, a wealth of demographics that we use primarily to assess the validity of the survey, but can also segment the data by. In terms of the data collection methodology, it's changed since 1990. We're doing landline, cell phones, text invitations, as well as email invitations to online surveys. And as you can see here, the text to online surveys has become the most prolific and productive way of interviewing people. And if you think about that, we don't do anything without texting 1 million times a day. So we're right in the middle of that. The universe was likely November 2020 voters and a subsample of likely March voters. We were in the field at the beginning of June. The average survey on the phone was 20 minutes. We don't know how long it takes people to do it online, but we do know that they hit this final submit button 24 hours a day. And we don't know how long it takes because they could start and then go have dinner and come back at 1 in the morning and finish the survey, which is great from our perspective because we're on their schedule rather than having to be on our schedule. Sample size varied depending on the universes that we were looking at, including the likely November, likely March that I mentioned earlier. And the error rates vary again depending on the sample sizes from as low as 4 in round numbers to rounding up to 5, which is fairly typical. Looking at the first section of this survey, the questions about how people perceive the district, the first one was opinion about the job the district's doing to provide quality education. We ask very favorable, somewhat unfavorable, very unfavorable. But the way we analyze this is we look at the total favorable versus the total unfavorable and then do a ratio. It's easy that way to compare with other districts and as well as yourself in past surveys. And so you can see that the total favorable is 54% in round numbers versus 21% unfavorable here. That's a 2.6 to 1 ratio of positive to negative. That's a pretty good place to be. It compares with the 2016 survey that we did, a little bit lower in terms of the overall ratio because the unfavorable has gone up, but basically, and the favorable has gone down a little bit, but it's all within the margin of error, so it's not a dramatic shift. In terms of the district's management of public funds, we're at a total favorable of 42% in round numbers versus 29% unfavorable. That's a 1.4 to 1 ratio. Again, it's a little bit lower than it was in 2016, but considering error rates, it really isn't statistically significant. What is significant about both of these two charts that I've shown you is you saw the don't know was 25 on the first one and it's 30 on this one. These are all people that are likely to vote in the election that we might decide to put a revenue measure on the ballot, and they can't go to the ballot not knowing what the quality of education is and what you're doing to spend taxpayer money wisely. So there is work to be done with about 25 to 30% of the voters to make sure that they understand what you're doing in those areas.
The final question in this section dealt with whether they agree that the district needs additional funding to do its job educating students. And in this survey, about 61% agree, 26% disagree. That's a ratio of 2.4 to 1. That's pretty good. Of course, there's still 14% that don't know, and we need to get to 2/3, obviously, for a parcel tax measure. So again, this highlights that there is work to be done. Compared with November 16's universe for the survey that we did where we last asked this question, we were at 2.4 as well, so it's virtually unchanged. At this point in the survey, we switched gears and started focusing directly on a parcel tax. In working with staff, we crafted the ballot questions you see on the right side of the page, and it conforms to the current state laws in terms of the ballot question. It's changed since you last had a parcel tax measure on the ballot. And so we've got the words that you can see in the last part of the question by adding $125 to the current $251 per parcel tax rate, raising $6 million annually for 8 years. And all we read was, or all they read, depending on the method that they took the survey, was that ballot question. We didn't provide any other information at this point. And you can see for the November election, we're at about 60%. For the March election, we're at about 60%, rounding the other way. And for a mail ballot election of one sort or another, we're at the same level as well. So that's not a bad place to start. Obviously, we need to get to 2/3, but I think there's a path there, as you'll see as we go through the rest of the slides. The next set of questions was things we might spend the money on, and this was a whole variety of them. This is only the top tier because that's really where we need to put our focus. The way this question was asked is all of these items that you see on the left side of the slide were asked in a random order. We said, are you much more likely, somewhat less likely, or much less likely to support the measure given that the money would be spent on these items? And you can see we've got a scale of 2, 1, -1, -2 across the bottom of the slide as well. We do that to create what we call an intensity score. And what that does is tells us how these items rate vis-a-vis each other. And we do that because if you were to just add the percentages together, you might have something that's 40% much more likely and 20% somewhat more likely, 60%, right? You could but have something else that was 20% much more likely and 40% somewhat more likely, also 60%, but not the same 60%. So this intensity score, while it seems abstract, eliminates that bias. And it not only looks at the positive side of the equation, but the negative as well. We also look at what we call tiers, and those are statistical groupings of items that are numerically different, and that ranking is important, but technically they're tied statistically, and you can see that illustrated here. While the rankings go from 1.16 to 1.01, because of the bias I described, we're in the low 70s for all of these items. So again, with that error rate that we talked about at the outset, statistically they're tied. The good news is there's a lot in Tier 1, and that it is all above 70%. It includes things like attracting and retaining highly qualified teachers, protecting quality academic instruction in core subjects, supporting reading, writing, math, science, and skills, a different wording of core subjects, providing competitive compensation to attract and retain highly qualified teachers, different wording again from that first one, protect music, art, athletic programs that provide well-rounded education to kids. I think it's notable there because we've tested art and music separately from athletic programs in the past here and many, many other districts. And art and music do well, athletic programs don't. The way to include them all as a well-rounded package is all three of them, not really separate them. So talk about them together. Expand mental health counseling services, provide career technical training, and protect music and art programs, again, a different wording, which doesn't do quite as well as the combined version. Again, there's lots of things that are positive here that we can talk about and that might help us rewrite and tweak the ballot question a little bit so it does even better. The next set of questions, it looks much the same. These are informational statements, so they are a little more argumentative, and in this case, they are positive arguments. We do the same thing in terms of the intensity score, but the only caveat is that you'll notice across the bottom of the chart, we don't have a negative side of the equation. There's no -1, -2 on this particular question set. So that means that you can still rank them very accurately, and you can still get a good sense of what's most important, but you just can't compare these scores with the previous set of questions. That's the only point. So again, Tier 1 here provides lots of useful items. Every penny from this measure will benefit local elementary, middle, and high schools, and what's in the ellipses there, and cannot be taken by the state. That's the magic words. Is at the top of the list at 1.29, or about 71%, at least somewhat more likely. By law, no money from this measure can be used for administrator salaries or administration is number 2. If the measure fails, the district will have to cut more than $4 million a year in classroom programs. And 4 is our schools are facing $6 million deficit. If this measure expires, without this measure, a source of locally funded programs will go away. And 5th one, our school district has already made deep cuts in administration, contracted services, et cetera. So all of those are fairly important. I won't read the whole list in deference to your time. But again, there's a lot to work with, and we're, for the most part, in the 70s. We dropped to the high 60s toward the bottom of the list, but there's lots of things to work with. So at this point in the survey, they've heard a list of things that we might spend the money on. They've heard some of these positive statements, and we come back to our ballot question a second time. Now, all they've heard is additional information from a positive perspective. And so we expect the results to go up, and in fact they do. For November, we go from 60% to 67 in round numbers. For March, it's 60% again to 67 in rounded numbers, and the same thing for a mail ballot universe from 60 to 67. So it's pretty stable across all different kinds of voting universes. The good news is, of course, we get to the 67% level, so we're a little above the 2/3 threshold. The next set of questions that were on the survey, but I don't have a slide for, talked about the additional informational items, but they were more critical in nature. And then we come back to the ballot question yet a third time, but this time, since we've talked about some negatives, we expect it to go down, and in fact it did. And we are now in our final test at 65, 65, and 64 in round numbers. That's all higher than we started, and even though they just heard negative items right before that, we've still gone up from where we started. If you average that second test and the third test, which is what happens in the real world, some people hear positive things and then negative things. Other people hear negative things and then positive things. Some people, it's all mixed up. So averaging the second and third test is important, and what we get for March is 66% and November 66%, the same thing for mail ballot. So we're right at the 2/3 threshold. Now that does mean that we have work to do, but there are certainly messages, as we've talked about, that can help us with that. So to summarize, again, when we look at the average of the last two surveys, $125 parcel tax measure in the March election is at 66%, and the November election it's at 66%. So that sort of suggests that you can pick the election environment, and Charles will talk more about that in detail, but I think that going sooner is always better. And as we hear this week and last week, beginning jitters of recession in the economy, sooner is better. Because the longer we go, the more likely we are to have a recession. Not that I have a crystal ball on that, because I don't, but it just makes sense to the longer we go, the more risk there is. The remainder of the recommendations I'll skip over because I've already said them. You can read them at your leisure. It talks about the items that are most important in terms of the messaging. But the final slide on the recommendations is really that we do recommend that you continue going forward with the process to prepare for a March 2020 parcel tax election and be considering the $125 amount of increase. So that's what I have. I can either turn it over to Charles or you can ask questions, your preference.
Do you want to add anything, Charles? Or?
I have a few slides, but if you have any specific survey
Oh,
questions.
any specific survey questions? Trustee Nell.
The, take, I guess it's page 9 would be an example, but you have a sample A, a sample B, a sample C. I didn't want to assume I knew what that was.
Yeah, what we did, because we had a long list of items, we did what was called a split sample. And we do that for a couple different reasons. We do it because we've got wording items that are very close to each other. And so the example on this one would be, you've got things like protect music and art programs that would provide a well-rounded education, which is at the bottom. And then you have protect music, art, and athletic programs, which is in the middle. So those were split sampled, so we weren't being repetitive for any individual respondent, but it gives us the ability to compare which one does better. Now, statistically, there's no difference between those two, but at the end of the day, the item in the middle, item N, does a little bit better numerically, so that's the way I would talk about it, as I sort of alluded to.
And then on page 10, it looks like it's the same basic
idea.
thing, but when I look at the chart, I see all maroon with one beige, so I can't really tell from the key, but it looks like the maroon is sample B and sample C is the greener beige color.
Right, and again, we shortened this list in deference to your time. This would really be 3 more pages, but they would not be tier 1 items. So just the way the split sample fell is the split sample B, I guess it is all in tier 1, and the other splits are in later tiers. So they're not as important, and again, it was for wording, or we also saved a little time in doing the split samples as well and could ask more questions.
Okay, I appreciate the explanation.
Trustee Cooper.
So when you ask these different, or questions in different ways, negatives or positives, are you essentially testing the water and seeing, and then based on the responses you see here, you're going to make recommendations in December? This is the ballot language that we recommend, essentially.
Yeah, we will work.
So you're just
with the district to do that. Okay. That's right. And the positives, negatives, and all of this simulates what happens in the real world in a campaign. So there's meaning to the second and third tests. We're not just asking them for academic purposes.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have for now.
All right. Oh, Trustee Millerick.
In this case, you looked at that your language includes an increase in the base amount of the bond or the parcel tax.
Yes.
Over, and it also includes the language that has an automatic accelerate. The word is an accelerator of inflation compensation.
That's correct. Escalator. Yeah. It's the 3 words are annual inflation adjustments.
Okay, and that was the language you tested, and so we could choose to change that if we want, as we learn more from before we put it on the ballot.
You certainly could. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't know what right is, but that's okay. So you tested the more restrictive language.
Yeah.
The more challenging language.
More challenging language, right. If you were to take the cost of living adjustments out, it would probably go up. But we didn't test it without it. We tested it with it in there.
Thank you for the clarification.
Trustee Mack.
Yeah, you'd mentioned that there was no impact to lowering the dollar amount.
That's right.
Flip it over. How's the elasticity going the other way? If we were to say, ask for 150, 175?
I think that the data shows or suggests, and this is probably the best view after we've heard nothing but the positives, that we're at 67%. Elasticity of demand is an economic term. It doesn't really apply to survey research because there is no demand and there is no supply. Right. Nobody is dying for a tax. Sure. So the analogy, while it's used a lot, is not entirely accurate. And I think this particular slide is suggesting we've reached the top of the threshold, and maybe that's a better term.
By virtue of 66%,
yeah.
67. Yeah. Okay, gotcha.
All right, Charles, if you have a couple slides. Oh, Trustee Miller.
Charles, when you speak, just March 2020, the city council, pardon me, November 2019, the city council has an election. There's people up for seats in that election. And then November 2020, the school board has elections. So because they chose different times to go to the new structure, we're sort of sandwiched in between. So just think about that as you present. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that timing question of which election is best is sort of the key question before us. So, the good news in these results is there's certainly a path forward to a parcel tax that, not only increases the rate, but also potentially includes the cost of living adjustment. The parcel tax that we passed in 2014 that's now set to expire in 2022 simply extended the $251 that people had been paying previously since 2009. And of course, the challenge with that is over the course of 8 years, the rate doesn't increase. With each passing year, the purchasing power of those dollars decrease, and so it's harder and harder for you to deliver on the promises that you made it back in 2009 or 2014. So, the goal here was to try to see to what extent we could increase the rate to address some of the budget challenges that you're currently facing, but also build in a mechanism like many of the other Marin County school districts have, so that the purchasing power of your tax rate, your parcel tax keeps pace with the cost of providing those services. So as you can see here, there's a path to 2/3. It's a narrow one. It's not going to be easy. These parcel taxes never are easy, as we've experienced here and in many other districts. And one of the also the interesting findings is we're not seeing significant differences in support between the different election types, right? They're all well within the margin of error and within a percentage point or two. So what that means is that there's no obvious target election date coming out of the survey research, so it means we have to really look at other circumstances, right? One, when are we going to be ready to go to the ballot? How quickly do you need to realize these funds just from a budget perspective? And also what other circumstances are occurring here in the community, whether that be other local elections, other regional tax proposals that may be coming before voters, economic issues like Brian referenced that might influence our thinking relative to the timing. And so for this conversation, I'll refer back here to, this was a slide that I shared with you a couple months ago when we started the parcel tax feasibility process. So this is a summary of some of the available election dates coming up that we think might be a good target. The soonest of those that we've been talking about here is March 2020. California moved its presidential primary election to March. Traditionally, they've been in June. That means we're going to have more of a say in the national nominating process. Higher voter turnout generally means younger parents of school-aged children are voting in larger numbers. Generally a pretty positive phenomenon for the passage of tax measures. So I think that's a good opportunity for us to look at, but it is soon, right? And I'll go over a timeline here in a minute for being prepared for that March election. We also have the opportunity to do a May special mail-in ballot election. That was the type of an election where we put the last parcel tax, Measure A, in 2014 on the ballot. That's an option too. Both of those election dates would, if the voters approve the tax, it would get on the tax roll so that this increased rate that we're talking about, the additional $125 per parcel, would take effect in 2020, 2021. So you would start realizing that revenue in the subsequent school year. If we wait beyond that, so November 2020 or the first part of 2021, right, that mail ballot's available to us in May of the odd years, then the tax won't hit the rolls until the following fiscal year, which will delay the receipt of funds for a full year. So that's one consideration that I wanted to make sure everyone was aware of, that how we time this election is not just a political decision, it's also a financial decision.
Just a quick question. I know we've done a great deal of analysis in terms of which election, in terms of the responses, but is it looking at it just as a single issue, this is right in front of you, this is all you're looking at, as opposed to those different elections have different clutter, right?
Yeah.
Levels of clutter. And can you comment on that, how that affects us?
Absolutely. I mean, the presidential general election that we'll have in November 2020 will absolutely be the most crowded ballot. That's when most of the statewide initiatives go to the ballot, so you have to wade through oftentimes 20 different issues before you get to the local measures like will be. So, that's the environment we were on with Measure G in 2016 with the bond measure, and a big part of that campaign was trying to make sure our issue didn't get lost in the noise surrounding that election and all the other stuff. It's certainly easier from the campaign perspective if there are fewer competing issues on the ballot, right? But the challenge then is if you're in a lower turnout election on the natural, typically the demographics of that turnout are more challenging, right? Older voters, less likely to be parent age, typically is a more conservative electorate too. So there's sort of a balancing act in that. We've had a lot of success here in the off-ballot special elections where we're able to basically leverage generally lower voter turnout, less competing issues on the ballot, but being able to focus on turning our supporters out to vote. So I think that's an opportunity. I also think the March primary election is interesting because there will be fewer competing issues on the ballot. You won't have all those local elections at the same time that are also competing for voter attention. And like I mentioned, I think the demographics, given the expected turnout in March 2020, are pretty positive. So my least favorite of these options would be the general election, where we're competing against all the other issues. Either the mail ballot or the March primary, I think, are preferable options. So let's dig in and look a little bit more closely. So as I mentioned, the first option that we might consider is that March 2020 election. And in April, we were looking at this timeline, and we wanted to get the feasibility study conducted over the summer so that we could bring these recommendations back to you and leave enough time for us to prepare for that March election if we wanted to take advantage of it. The deadline to qualify for the March ballot is December 6th. So that means December 6th, a board meeting prior to that, probably your second meeting in November is when we would bring back a resolution with the final ballot language, informed by this polling, informed by what we're hearing through our outreach, that would include the ballot language, all the final details for your consideration. And then at that point, if you adopt that resolution and call for the election, then we move into the advocacy campaign. So up until that point, the school district can use public resources to educate and inform the community about what your budget needs are, what the parcel tax does, what the consequences of losing parcel tax funding would mean, what the opportunity is if you were able to realize this funding, basically tell that informational story. But after the board votes to call for the election, then no public funds can be used to advocate for the passage of the measure. So that's when the independent campaign committee would have to form. We need parent leaders, teacher leaders, staff getting involved in a campaign. And so I think one consideration related to timing is this March election is going to occur sort of just after the holidays, right? Absentee ballots will go out the first week in February. So I think one of the sort of questions we have to ask ourselves relative to the best timing is, can we organize an independent group of campaign leaders so that they're ready to take the reins, before the end of the calendar year, because they really need to have a campaign organization and infrastructure in place that's ready to hit the ground running come January 1st, when this campaign will really need to launch. If we're not confident that we can do that, then we should probably be looking at that May opportunity or even to 2021. The good news is the parcel tax doesn't expire until 2022, so we have a few options, even leaving ourselves a second bite at the apple if we were to come up short with an initial try, because the worst case scenario we're trying to avoid is that you would lose parcel tax funding altogether for a year or more. So I guess, with that's sort of the factors that we're thinking about. I certainly think that there's a path forward here in March 2020. But, I think we need to make sure that we're comfortable that, the timeline available to us is doable and we can put the organization together to be successful.
So to be clear, I'm sorry, I jumped in.
Yeah, that's all right. Go ahead.
This is my first one of these. So to be clear, the 251 expires 2024, 3?
No,
2022.
2, okay. And so we're going to have to go back. So let's say this happens, we got the 125, and that's moving along. Okay, but then we're going to come right back to replace the 251? No?
No, this measure would do both. This measure
Okay.
would renew the 251 and add 125. And as written here, it would also build in a cost of living adjustment that would increase the tax by, most districts in Marin, it increases by 3% annually.
On the
for inflation.
whole sum, not just the 125?
The entire rate would
Got it.
adjust. Yeah.
Yep, Trustee Cooper.
So I'm interested to hear your comments about the March 2020 versus the mail-in.
Mhm.
So you don't think the mail-in would be the preferable way to go?
Well, it's preferable in that it gives us a few extra months of planning. Right now, we mentioned that December 6th deadline to qualify for the ballot. That would be a first week of February deadline if we were looking at the May ballot. So we get a couple extra months to plan and prepare. We're not going to be competing with any other issues on that ballot. We're likely to be the only thing. But what it means is that you really need a strong campaign organization that can, identify and mobilize supporters to vote disproportionately to the rest of the population, because that's how you make up the natural disadvantage of lower voter turnout in a special election. So I think that they are both good options. Probably the biggest downside to waiting till May is I think that, as Brian mentioned, with each passing month, we take on risk that the economy could be in a downward turn.
You're right. And then one more question, Debbie. So looking at your timeline here, if we get to close to December 6th of this year, and we have something like the results you've shown here, and they haven't gone up, what would your recommendation be if we're right at the cusp?
Well, my recommendation would be that we spend the time between now and that December 6th deadline to, one, tell the story to the community about what your needs are and why this proposal is being considered, but also to test the waters on, are there advocates out there that are ready to come together to run a campaign? If we don't see that in place by November, we're not ready to go, right? And that's where I think we pull back and we look at May or even dates beyond that, because we're not ready to move into a campaign.
But you're comfortable with these 65? I mean, these numbers are right at the cusp, so.
I'm as comfortable as I can be, because dropping the tax rate doesn't increase support, but we do get to 2/3, so I think we have a, conceptually a viable option. And, as we've experienced here in Novato in past elections, it's always a dogfight to get to 2/3, and we've got another one here.
Yep, okay, great. Thank you, both of you.
Did you have additional information? No, that's it,
Nope,
right?
that's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have one blue card. Do you mind if I just, okay. Karen McCormish? Hi again. Thanks for waiting this
No
out.
problem. I just wanted to talk about the parcel tax language, and I hope it passes because I live in Kentfield, and my parcel tax is $2,100. It's a lot of money. My kids don't go to school in Kentfield, and yet we are still. I voted for it. So my concern about this parcel tax is it doesn't seem to be any wording in it for special ed funding or reduced class size funding, which we haven't seen in the contract for the teachers since 2008. The current language about class size doesn't have any repercussions. When we go over our state mandated 29.9 class size level, and other than if we get to between the 30 and 32 level, as of today, there are 2 fourth grade classrooms at Hamilton that have enrolled 33 and 34 students. At Loma Verde, as I spoke about last time, we have a 3-4 split, a 4-5 split, a fourth grade with 30 students, and 2 fifth grade classes with 29 students. And it's just a little crazy. Today was all in one day. I almost said, oh, never mind, I'm too tired, I can't even think. So I looked at the old parcel taxes in 2009 and 2014, and the language in the parcel taxes said that they were to guarantee a limiting of class size increases. And then I looked more closely to the ballot, at the ballot language, and it said the money was going to be used to avoid significant increases in class sizes in all grades. What does that mean? What did that mean? If we were at 24 students, is not hitting the state limit a significant increase in class size? So I'm really concerned about using the parcel tax. Where you're not going to get retention of good teachers is you're going to get people like me going to teach where I can walk to school in Kentfield just to get the money for the last 5 years before I retire. it's scary, and it's painful. And tomorrow I'm going to put my head down and start teaching, and I'll still show up at the meetings. I'm not sure if I'm going to say anything of value. I'm not sure if this is of anything of value, but I really think that Novato is a very unique and wonderful community, and I love teaching here. I love the diversity of Novato. I love the kind of hands in the dirt kind of feeling that I feel in Novato. I feel connected. And even when the organizational chart that was put up didn't actually have teachers on it, did anybody else notice that? Had students, parents, our community, and teachers weren't on the org chart yet. So think about having some language in there about having reduced class size, because if we get rid of some of the problems in elementary school, it might make it a little easier for the kids in middle and high school.
All right, so I'll bring it back to the board. Trustee Millerick and then Trustee Gasson.
Just to be clear about how this works, the parcel tax is used for the operational parts of the district. Bond money is used for capital construction, concrete and steel and paving, and they're different. So the parcel tax is focused for operating the district. Primarily, our operation occurs in classrooms. So I think the comments that were raised about how to make sure that this is tailored are, we should be discussing. I know we like general language because it allows as much flexibility when you get down to the details, but the whole foundation for this is we're trying to upgrade the operating program of the district. We're not trying to build fancy buildings. So
Yeah.
that's what parcel taxes are about, and that's
Right.
what they're about in Novato. So
Thank you.
yeah.
Trustee Gasson.
So I was just going to talk about the timing. I actually am kind of split. The March, I will take a step back and say I helped run the parcel tax that was on a special ballot. It's hard. So doing it in May, I like the fact you get a little bit more time. I'm concerned with March that, we've got the holidays, everybody's out getting support behind it, but it is really hard when you're the only thing on there. And I don't remember what Yancey said, but there's a little bit of a cost factor too, because we would be the only thing on there. Having said all that, though, I'm anxious to have a go at it and shoot. I'm probably more inclined to say March, but just wanted to put that point of reference that having gone through this personally, it's hard to do a special election.
Trustee Mack.
So like I said earlier, this is my first time through one of these processes. So I'm learning a few things. One question I have, maybe just for the group in general, in our past efforts, have we had organized opposition like we had with Measure G?
Not so much with the parcel tax, no.
I mean, it's happened,
But not like Measure G.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because of course, with our numbers being where they
And
are,
we can't be
that's what
naive
scares-
that's not going to
scares
be
me.
the same,
Right.
We're in different times.
Yeah, yeah, got that. I just, with the numbers being where they are, that's,
Yeah.
that's something
Right.
that scares me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Trustee, no.
I'm just curious about the division into individual district elections that's going on regionally, if not the whole state. Is there any experience with how that's affecting the electorate yet, or we can only speculate, or has anybody asked that question anywhere along the lines? Now that you are going to vote in a smaller district for your city council person or school trustee or sanitary district board member, does that make me any more likely to vote or any less likely to vote?
I've had many clients up and down the state that have moved to district elections over the last few years, and I really haven't seen any noticeable difference in voter turnout or impact on these types of bond and tax measures.
All right, so, this report came forward as a discussion action. I think we're kind of at a point where I think staff would literally like to know, and Charles and Brian, next steps. What does this board think in regards to, are you absolutely opposed to extending our parcel tax, or you still want to continue to keep this conversation going. Like they said, we can see if we have support in this community in regards to people rallying to help with this campaign at all. We can work on that and see if there's interest in getting a group together. That's really the key thing, as you said, I think, is finding that group of people who can take this and run with it, because we can't do a whole lot here at the board table after a while. So the first part is also informing this community, keeping them abreast of what's going on with Nevada Unified, how the parcel tax works, the language itself. But I think from here tonight, I just want to make sure that there is consensus to keep moving forward with this. I'm not hearing a negative of, no, I do not want to see this parcel tax extended. Yes.
What do you think? I couldn't hear your comment. I think you guys' reflection on this as we are talking about this is important. I mean, you're sitting here listening, and you're part of this community. Yeah, I would love, I mean, we're making a community-wide decision, yeah.
Come up to the, please.
Yeah, please. I mean, this is,
No.
if we don't all work together, this isn't going to happen.
All right. So, interestingly, I just left a 4-hour union training before coming here, so it's hot off the press, man.
I missed my board training, so.
And I will tell you, you can have very specific language. I heard you said, you say that we like to keep the language kind of open and vague, and, so we have the freedom to do what we need to do. We would like the exact opposite. I think that being very specific, retain and attract quality teachers, to me, that's not sufficient. I think it should directly say what percentage of the parcel tax is going to go directly to salary. It has been done. The training director from CFT told us today that it exists, and what it does is get incredible buy-in from the teachers to get it to pass, okay? I also think, like Ms. McCormick said, it would be great if there was specific language about capping class size. This is a huge issue. I cannot tell you how many emails I've received in the last 2 weeks. We're busting at the seams, and this culture of caring I shared with the teachers during our union lunch on Monday, we want to feel cared for too, and that I don't feel is a priority. And so with specific language comes clarity on what you are doing to retract, you know what I mean? Attract and, so. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, well, I mean, at some point for this to work, everybody who represents our kids and their education is going to have to stand up and go talk to their neighbors.
Yes.
And that means me and you both
Right.
are talking to our next door neighbors about how important this is. And
absolutely.
And if we can't do that, if we can't have a foundation for us to have that agreement, then the schools, this is where the schools go and stand before the Rotary and the whole rest of the community.
Exactly. And one of the reasons I took on this role is I would love to have a partnership with you, with the district, with the board, and I don't feel like we're there, and maybe if we work together we can get there, but I feel like a step is being more specific. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
For being so frank in the conversation.
Yeah.
I think that's where we need to start this conversation.
Absolutely, and I can't help myself but be brutally honest and direct sometimes, so I do really appreciate what you do and what you give. I just, say it like it is, so thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Trustee Nell.
Thank you.
So from a political consultation perspective, the question is specificity around the language, but if we're couching this as an extension of existing, how much of the old language do we need to hold on to, or are we going to go out and say, this is new? I guess is the question I have. I mean, I'm not coming down on one side or the other on the specifics because, well, quite frankly, I don't know that we could ever get these many people to agree on the specifics. But I think we have the general direction and goals in mind. But I was just curious about the fact that we couch it as an extension. How much can we change it?
Yeah, well, on some level, the math behind the numbers has to work, right? So 251 of the money would be just an extension of what you're already receiving. So essentially, there's 125, and then it would be, a board decision as to how to allocate that. And I mean, that would be the money that we could work on trying to, budget and figure out what level of specificity is appropriate. But remember, you're not adopting a tax for 1 year or 2 years. You're adopting a tax, theoretically for 8 years. So we have to make sure that we aren't being so specific that it will be impossible 4, 5, 6 years from now for the district to keep those promises. So I'm not saying that level of specificity is impossible. I work on lots of parcel taxes, and they all have different levels of specificity given the needs of that district. So, you find that right balancing act so that, it assures the different stakeholders that they're going to get what they want out of it, while also making sure that it's something that you could administer over the life of the tax.
All right. Yeah, okay, that's all. I think that's where we're at right now. And I think that's what I'm hearing from this board. Yes. Yep, okay. No, I think I'm good. I'm
I just
hearing
wanted
it.
to say something.
Yes, Trustee Gill.
Okay, so I think you all know how I feel about having to ask the community for money, and I'm really upset with how we're going, and it's not our fault, and I wish that.
You mean the state, how the
Right.
state's going.
And that's
Okay.
what I was
You said
gonna-
us,
that's-
so that's why.
How we're going right
Yeah.
now because of the state.
Okay.
And I was just gonna say, because, I wish, Sacramento would, I don't see them sitting here and talking to us and saying, here, no more flat funding, and it's really upsetting. And I have to be honest, I don't want to do this. So I don't know what direction we need it. We need the money. And, but I'm just also curious about, what kind of message we're sending to Sacramento. And, it's almost like, we want to go forward. I want to go forward. And it's like we have no choice. So I just have to say what I had to say.
No, yeah, it is hard. All right, I think we're good. Everybody's. No, I think that's it. I think so. Trustee Gasson and myself have kind of been sitting on a little subcommittee group, I guess, with this parcel tax. So reviewing the results and that kind. Are you guys fine with us continuing forward with that? Do we want another trustee, a third trustee as part of that little subcommittee? Do we still, I'm assuming we still need some.
President Butler, since we have this, like the earliest deadline is December 16th, have you guys walked backwards, like at the next meeting, we should be this far along, or when do you think we'll take action? And
Yeah, I think.
is that part of this conversation right now, or?
It can be. We can,
Okay.
you mapped it backwards a little bit, but.
Yeah. We've mapped out a timeline for what we would need to do next in terms of informational outreach from the district, starting to develop the draft resolutions. Part of that's going to be receiving some feedback through our outreach efforts. But I think probably the biggest, milestone is, by end of October, we really need to make sure that the infrastructure for that campaign is coming together. And if we don't see that, then I think that's where we need to start looking beyond March.
Okay, so I don't have an issue with Trustee Gasson and President Butler working as a subcommittee to analyze resolution language, et cetera. It's a difficult choice for all of us, all voters. But quite frankly, I think it's something that we need to do. I support a March election, and I think that we can convince the community that this needs to be done. And so I'm in.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Nell. All right.
I think if we can broaden the committee, not with other trustees, but if you can reach to the community members, some in the room here, and just have start the foundations for what will become the outside committee that's going to move forward.
Yeah, right.
And so there's some people running for city council that may want to help participate in that, and others in the room, so.
Okay,
thanks.
thank you. All right, that wraps up that item.
Thank you for coming. It's good to see you.
Thank you for waiting. Appreciate that. All right, our last item, board members, this is the award of the contract to Field Turf for the athletic field complex project at Novato High School.
Good evening again, trustees. It's always a pleasure to be between you and the end of the meeting. Real quick, as a refresher, back in end of June, the last meeting in June, the school board, y'all approved the updated project cost for the athletic fields complex project at Novato High School, just a little over $9 million. And you also approved award of the leaseback contract to Robert A. Bothman Construction, which their part of it was about $6.4 million. And at that time, I think we mentioned as a value engineering or cost savings measure, we were looking at taking out a portion of the synthetic turf itself and going directly to the manufacturer to save money in the markup from the contractor. We, since that time, looked into that, got a quote from Field Turf, which is the contractor that we used last year during our stadium returfs at the two high schools, and found that we did save a good bit of money by going directly to that under the CMAS contract mechanism. So we're here before you tonight to get approval to award a contract in the amount of $1,650,169 to Field Turf for the athletic field complex project at Novato High School. And happy to answer any questions you might have.
Savings?
It was, if I remember correctly, it was a couple $100,000. The markup and but because Field Turf's still in the CMAS market, we were able to just go to them directly like we did last time. So it was a good choice.
Trustee Nell and Trustee Gasson.
Excuse me.
So just to be sure, but I'll assume what you're telling us is that by bypassing the subcontractor, the resale of the materials, there's no chance of invalidating warranty on the materials by having it installed by someone who didn't sell it to us. So there's no extended warranty that we're giving up, but from the installer now. So it's basically kumbaya with the
right. Contractor
who's going to put it in. That he's okay.
Yes.
Just want to make sure. But technically, there's no loss of warranty or
no. Wouldn't say it's a common practice, but other folks have done this approach as a cost savings measure.
Trustee Gasson?
So I'm actually fine with this, but in the context of what we've been talking about and kind of what you're 1.6, how long does this last?
Turf is usually about 10 years.
So 10.
Yeah,
Okay, well, yeah, so we're going to go with the
in 9 years, you have 2 football fields, and in 10 years from December, you'll have 3 more fields. That
I
come
just
up.
it just put it in perspective when I looked at that dollar amount, thinking,
I
oh my
will say-
gosh, that's huge.
Well, but there's landscaping, water. There's offsets that definitely need to be considered.
No, I get that too, but still, we're not. I get that, but we're not. The money we're saving, we're not. Well, or that's another conversation. Is whatever money we're saving, we should put in the bucket to repay this. But. Right, which is what I was going to say, is that it's going to go away. So that money is negligible, but the field usage or those bathroom stalls price of sale.
Well, maybe it can be applied towards special education needs and possible teacher attraction and retention.
No, that's what I'm
needs.
saying. I think that's all great, except for the fact in 10 years, we got to come up with it's going to be 2. I don't know. It just for perspective, I'm just like, I know it's going to be more. But anyway, all right, I'm fine.
Let me ask the bigger question. What is the total value of the district property for all of our campuses? What's our asset value?
Really, at 10 o'clock? No.
Well, he said the number earlier.
Yeah.
you're getting close to $1 billion in terms of total asset.
Billion?
Yeah.
B
you're getting
billion.
close.
So $1 billion worth of something deteriorates over time, and we have to maintain it. So you can just do turf or just bathrooms or just roofs, but it's $1 billion investment that we're maintaining. It's the biggest investment in the city of Novato.
To Trustee Gasson's point, I'm sorry to interrupt. I will say, because of the locale of where we're at and the climate, weather climate we have, when we replaced the 2 stadium turfs last summer, we did it at year 14. And the contractor said, wow, you have it, both the track and the field turf were in a lot better shape than as normally expected, so we got a little extended life. So that was because of where we're at geographically, so there's a little silver lining.
All right. This is an action item, as you know, so if we're good. Whoa. First by Trustee Millerick, a second by Trustee Mack to approve the award of this contract of $1.6 and change million to Field Turf for the athletic field complex project at Novato High School. All those in favor? 7-0. All right.
Thank you.
That brings this meeting to a close. Our next regular board meeting is September 3rd, followed by the 17th. Meeting's adjourned.